All right, so it looks like I am live once again in my tea corner, brewing us some tea, trying out some new teapots, and I'm gonna post this link to Facebook real quick so that everyone can know that I'm actually on here on the YouTube. All right, that is shared and ready to go. So basically today I'm gonna do a little bit different approach than the last few streams because I wrote out actually a few notes of a few things that I wanted to talk about, which I could have just filmed a video on, and perhaps I will after this, but I just have a few ideas and a few points that I want to hash out while I'm brewing tea, and then I'll be answering questions after I'm done talking. It's kind of a funny thing because sometimes people ask me about my videos and be like, how do you do them? Or do you do a lot of editing? Does it take a long time? And honestly, I would say 99% of my videos are just one take. I'll either have a rough idea or I'll have an outline in my mind and I'll just do it. Like the 2 courses that I have on Udemy, for example, I just did those in basically one go, like one day, 2 hours all the way through, did everything just boom, ready to go. So kind of 2 things that I want to talk about in this live stream. As you may have seen, the title is Base Desires on Circus Stilts. And what that means, aside from being kind of a funny, absurd image, is that oftentimes what people construe, or I'd say misconstrue, as being spiritual or more conscious is inevitably just putting their base desires on circus stilts. Meaning it's a misunderstanding, a misapprehension of something which is at the core of who and what we actually are, and then trying to turn it into something else, and then just creating a whole manner of psychosis, schizoid behaviors, and just a whole lot of falsity and nonsense. And just on a personal level is generally why I don't actually fraternize with or interact with or put myself in these circles very much, because people are just honestly a bit just out to lunch when it comes to that. So that's the first thing I'll talk about, which is base desires on circus stilts, and I'll talk through food, money, sex, power, self-worth, and also stress response and fight or flight. And then the other thing that I want to mention as well is something that I've noticed quite a lot in dealing with people in this world, and also just looking back at my own life, is basically like using natural stuff as a way of basically supporting or propping up bad habits. Meaning, like, I have this habit that's actually harmful and negative, so I'm going to use this like herb or supplement or natural healing modality to allow me to keep doing that, or to maybe slim off the negative side effects, rather than actually examining and acknowledging that that habit is actually destructive. That habit is probably rooted in some masochistic or sadistic tendency in our own mindset, which sounds crazy to believe or to hear, but in all honesty, there's a great deal of self-hatred in the world, and there's a great deal that people inflict on themselves in a wide spectrum of ways. So actually, over the years, there's just quite so many questions that I've gotten from people where they just kind of want to use like Chinese medicine or Chinese philosophy or Taoism or something as a justification for like their bad habit. A great example of this, which is related, is people will abuse drugs and say that it's okay because they're natural plants, and that it's okay because other cultures use these plants for various purposes for various reasons across historical context, which of course I was guilty of that as well in my young age, because that's just, it's a natural phase that I think many of us go through. But what is unfortunate about that is there are many People that never grow out of that phase, never realize that it's actually just a phase, and never actually realize that perhaps what they're up to is maybe just really untrue and based on a lot of denial and probably some degree of self-hatred and psychosis. And I say that based on meeting tons of people twice my age, people very much older than me who have been into these things for longer than I've been alive, and they literally have nothing to show for it. And I will make a distinction there. There is a difference between a medical application and a recreational indulgence, or like, oh, it's for my spiritual path, versus like you actually have legitimate health problems or health conditions that you're trying to deal with. These are very different things. So that's why you can't really say like, oh, these things are bad, because it really depends. It's really a complicated schema. It's a complicated situation, but there obviously are situations where people are deep into abuse and escapism and denial, and just use natural things or alternative things to sort of prop up their bad behavior, in essence. And in my opinion, a great deal of the quote natural world is actually a lot of that, is just a lot of propping things up on stilts, which is fine and necessary, because obviously pain sucks and we're sort of predisposed to want to avoid it. However, we should also perhaps look at the root causes of things and perhaps try to find better ways. So what brings that up, and a good example of that again, is people will say like, hey, what do you think about, what does Chinese medicine like think about using marijuana, right? But you can tell the reason why they're asking based on a few of their other sentences within that message. The reason why they're asking is because they're just sort of looking for justification for what they already believe, which is kind of the nonsense that I already suggested before. Because just on a practical level, if cannabis or hemp is mentioned in ancient texts, what they are referring to is not what we have today. It's not the same plant. It's not the same effect. It's apples to zebras is really not a good thing. So it's just a weird thing you run into when you really start to deal with people and you listen to what they're really asking, usually. And oftentimes people are just kind of seeking validation, and oftentimes, unfortunately, misuse very nice, awesome things just to prop up their bad behaviors, which I'm not knocking or saying that people should or shouldn't do. I'm just perhaps pointing some awareness to it and just suggesting that perhaps a bit more self-reflection and inquiry could be beneficial or useful. Because, you know, like I said, these are phases, these are growth things, and no one's perfect. Everyone's, you know, working with the hand that they were dealt in whatever fashion. But that's just one thing that I'll maybe get into a bit later. But the real main impetus, or the main thing of this live stream, is what I had said with the title, which is Base Desires on Circus Stilts, which is also, again, in my opinion, quite a great deal of what is construed as spiritual or natural, especially now that it's so trendy. Like, you just look at the stuff people are putting out, and it's just 10 levels deep of a misunderstanding and a pure delusion passed down through 10 people, and just becomes something who knows what. So base desires, meaning our food, how we relate to money, how we relate to sex, power, and also I'm including self-worth and our stress response, because these are things that people are misunderstanding. And basically the general idea here is that our base desires are just our base desires. The reason why I say that is because there's tons of people these days who think like, well, I eat this diet, so that means I'm spiritual. Or I don't have money, so it means I'm spiritual. Or I'm open to all the abundance the universe gives me, and I'm an abundant manifesting creator, so I'm more spiritual. Or a big thing now is people with making their genitals spiritual, because they read that, oh, it's the root chakra, which is correlated with this. which I, just as a clarification, literally people are not contacting or working with their chakras at all, like literally next to no one, because the vibrational frequency of those is so far beyond what any of us are capable of contacting or accessing. Literally all people are doing is just overstimulating their nervous system, creating heat in their nervous system and stimulating their imaginary centers in their brain. Literally, that's all. But they're in deep self-hypnosis and trance, so it feels like, oh, it's spiritual. But again, as I'll say, it's just a misunderstanding of what things are. So basically our base desires are just our base desires. So why I mention that is, if you just go on Instagram or YouTube or anywhere on the internet or bookstore, for example, there's so many people who are like, oh, sex is bad, but if you do tantra and you make it spiritual, then it's good now. And sex is like your kundalini, and it's like your access to divine creative energy and all of this other derivative nonsense. So people are like tantra people, or people who are like down when it's like, oh, I'm polyamorous, you know, because it's more of a spiritual, conscious, awakened path. When in actuality, it's just hedonism. It's literally all it is. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to play with your genitals all day, why not? You know, you're an adult. You can have sex and jack off and do whatever you want. It's fine. Like, no one's telling you shouldn't, other than yourself. But that has literally nothing to do with kundalini or being spiritual or awake or conscious. And in actuality, it is actually just moving further away from those things, because it's creating all of these barriers and extra levels of delusion and false belief on top of ultimately just basically base desires that everyone has, that are just literally base desires. They're a powerful part of what it means to be a human being. And for some reason, everyone hates it. Like the other side of that, the sex thing, is like kind of the no-fap people, or the incels, or the, I guess, voluntary cells. People are like, oh, well, all this is bad, and like, so I just need to like nip it in the bud and just hold it all in. And basically that can actually make you feel pretty good. Actually, I mean, both sides can make you feel good, but ultimately over the long term will just stimulate your nervous system and cause depletion and heat and undermine the faculties that you were gifted at birth. And the deeper, more problematic aspect is that there will be these legitimate, verifiable physical deficiencies and imbalances that will occur, but then the programming will be like, oh, it's cleansing, oh, it's upgrading, oh, it's detoxing, oh, it's just something that will allow me to deny that it exists so I can keep on with this psychotic belief system that has no basis in anything other than a lot of false belief and misappropriation of other information. So that's just one example of that. Another example from a different train of thought is our food. So basically people will get into this whole thing of like making their food their spiritual path and getting into this basically Puritanism. Either Puritanism on one side or just denial on the other, where people will go so far as to be like, oh, I'm going to be a breatharian. I'm going to stare at the sun and get my energy. I'm going to be like a plant. Or like, I'm only going to eat raw, pure plant foods. And it's just pure fantasy. Like, it has no basis in reality other than distinct, large psychotic breaks from self, from your body, and from the rest of the world. But ultimately, the bigger question is like, why do you hate yourself that much? Why do you hate food? Why do you hate life so much that you have this distorted relationship with this fundamental basic thing? Not that there's anything at all wrong with like eating well and feeling good, obviously that makes sense. Like, it seems like it should be a bit it should be a bit common sense. But it's so profoundly distorted that so many of these industries have arisen. And some of my favorite examples of this insanity is like, basically is like people who like for example, there was this really famous quote influencer who was outed as not being actually vegan, even though their whole brand was about being vegan. And so people were like distraught and upset. Oh my God, you've been lying to us for so long. I can't believe it. And then if you read the comments below the video, some of them are pretty hateful. Some of them are genuinely upset. Some of them are whatever. But the ones that stood out where people were like, wait, so you're cool with like fake boobs and Botox and plastic surgery, but somehow not being a vegan is too extreme or something like that. And to me, that was kind of funny because like when I had a brick and mortar business and dealt with people in the health world all the time, I would see this. I would see women decked out in plastic surgery, but then being like, oh, I don't do coconut oil because I read that it's bad, or oh, I'm not going to drink out of that cup because it's plastic, or oh, I'm a vegan because all these things are toxic. I'm like, dude, you've got so many drugs in your bloodstream, but butter's bad? I'm confused. And this was just something that I would see a lot, especially if I went to LA, where it's like even more exaggerated. But it's really one of the best examples of this thing being completely perverted and twisted, basically for people's hedonism, people's vanity, and just selfish interest. But over the top of it is like, I'm healthy, I'm conscious, I'm into wellness. It's like, no, you're just insecure and you hate yourself and you probably hate life. I mean, I know that's harsh. That's harsh to say, and it's not very polite or whatever, but ultimately we're all adults, and oftentimes that's actually what's at the core and what actually needs to be addressed. Not taking 12 more milligrams of vitamin C per day or 17 more Botox shots a year or whatever. But it was just a weird thing that I would see, that I started to see very early on when I got into this type of industry. And it's just this fundamental relationship. It gets so distorted and thrown out of whack. And I'm not knocking anyone who is like that or has chosen those things, but the thing is which underlies all of this basically, is there's oftentimes two realities. There's the one that's actually happening, and then there's the psychotic hypnosis, trance stuff that people are really in their head. So if you become skilled in, say, something like Chinese medicine, you can start to read people's voices, you can read their eyes, you can read their tongue, you can read their face, you can read their body structure, you can read all of these subconscious and unconscious cues. So that's usually, to me, like at this point, I can, like this vegan person that I was talking about earlier who was outed as not being vegan, this is this whole scandal. I watched about 90 seconds of the person's video, and her eyes, there was just nothing there, like just dead. And you see people like that. I'm going to see if I can do it, because there's so many like authorities and influencers and spiritual teachers and all of these people that are very popular and very successful. But I actually look into their eyes and see or various aspects of their body and see what's actually going on, and it does not match with what they're presenting to the world. And oftentimes their eyes are just dead, just like, hi, I'm very spiritual and happy today. But then actually it's just like, it's really what it is. It's just crazy. It's just insanity. But, you know, no, not necessarily knocking it, because these are people's livelihood, and I don't want to say anything negative about them because, you know, they're doing their own thing. It's just these are things that stand out to me. And I'm often faced with this problem where, do I say what I actually think and feel and see, or do I do like the polite, character, political correct, nice version? So I guess today I'm more so doing closer to what I actually think and feel, but still not all the way there, but pretty much closer. Just because I don't want to be rude or, you know, put anyone down. These are just things that stand out quite clearly and strongly. As the further in you get to this stuff, the more obvious that it gets. And the point of that is that you can actually see and hear the fantasy people are living in, and then you can actually like check how their actual physiology is responding to that, and how oftentimes they don't match, which creates very funny situations, because in modern times people are into all these hip and trendy biochemical based diet and lifestyle and supplementation things, which they think mechanically in paper on this finite fixed category is like good for them, but then you actually like, well, it's really killing your liver and your kidneys, but you know, I'm glad you feel great now, but let's give it 10 years. And that's pretty much always has been my perspective on so many things in this industry. Is like, nah, let's just give it a few years and we'll see where they're at. We'll see how this all plays out. And I probably should have started writing things down and making a notebook, because quite a few of the things that I thought a few years ago have mostly all played out within themselves. Because if you can read subconscious or unconscious things in this way or whatever. So anyways, back to the point of this. I talked about sex, talked about food, a little bit about money. There's also the thing about power and self-worth. And basically within the power thing, this often will manifest as this whole complete distrust of authority, complete negation of power, and or turning into some conspiratorial, way far off, way divorced from reality type of thinking. And basically, oh, like power's bad and we shouldn't have it, you shouldn't do it. And then it basically, people think they're getting liberated and independent, but actually they're getting more disempowered and more dependent. Because power in and of itself is not bad. Like, it just is. It really just depends. And that's true with any of the base desires. But to deny them, to repress them, is just never going to work. To exaggerate them also is just probably not going to work. But that's generally the things that quite a lot of us are trapped in, which is understandable, because it's not like it's necessarily a piece of cake or smooth sailing all the time. So the power thing is a big one. You can easily see it a lot in just the cascade of scandals over the last few years that have come out, especially with the yoga crowd and all of the people that have been outed as just total shysters and abusive and deceiving in all types of different ways. Because basically what happens is, and not just in the yoga community, it's in any position of power, any position of authority, basically what you're doing is you're taking all of your internal stuff, positive and negative, and cranking the dial up. So all of your unresolved stuff with your base desires is going to come out. You can pretty much guarantee that. And the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of the people who end up in these positions don't know any of the stuff that we're really talking about here, never considered it or addressed it or examined it. So they become victims to that generally. The flip side is people do the psychotic delusion route and try to spiritualize everything. Like, oh, I sat and meditated and I feel relaxed, so I'm above that. Oh, I did yoga, so now I'm more flexible, so now I'm above that. Oh, I did the juice fast, or I'm a vegan, or I gave money away, or I'm a nice person, so I'm above all that. No, no, not above it. And the proof is in the pudding, because these people were clearly not above it. And they were trapped in a bunch of denial and fantasy, and then created this facade of an image. And then all of their followers believed in it and were like, oh, I wish I could live in that level of delusion, so I'm going to get on board with this guy, and maybe he'll help me, you know, be that much in denial as well. And then it creates this somewhat harmonic, symbiotic relationship. Like, there's another dude, I can't remember his name. He's like this Dutch guru guy who's like pretty recent on the scene, but I watched a documentary about him recently, and it was just like, this is the most ridiculous stuff I've ever heard. I can't believe anyone takes this person seriously. Like, whenever I hang out with my friends and I'm just joking and making up stupid shit, it's basically exactly what these people say, but they're being serious. I'm just saying it because it's stupid and it sounds ridiculous. Like, I should just start recording it and then just sell it or something. I don't know. So another big thing with the base desires is the self-worth, which maybe it isn't necessarily a base desire, but it might as well be, because if your self-worth is not in a very good place, then it's going to throw off a lot of things in your life. And the thing is, with self-worth and self-esteem, it's not really something you can work on or improve. It tends to be you just kind of have it or you don't. Or more importantly, you get to a place where you just don't care. Like, for example, there's one thing that people often don't understand is sometimes the solution is to minimize the fixation. Like, one example of this is a lot of people think, oh, I'm very empathic, I'm very spiritual, I'm very sensitive, I'm an HSP, I'm an empath. Well, maybe in a rare statistical percentage, but probably what's more accurate is you're just over-identifying and over-fixating and over-emphasizing and putting excessive importance on feelings and subtle sensations on your nervous system. And then you have an identity about that being good or special or better or superior, so you use that to elevate your pre-existing insecurity and feel better than what you were and better than other people or special in some way. And then that just creates this feedback loop to where that thing just gets stronger, and then the more you believe it, the stronger it gets. But in actuality, it's just a fixation. It's just a mental distortion. It doesn't mean any of those things the vast majority of the time. Obviously, there are rare cases and examples of people who are actually dialed into things, but that's a bit more uncommon than you think. And all this nonsense about everyone's a spiritual being, everyone can be a Buddha, everyone can be conscious, everyone can be spiritual, everyone can be a master. That's literally not true and has never been true. It's something someone made up at a certain point. It's really not true. I know this is probably kind of a bit not the most uplifting or explicitly positive talk, but in reality, I think it's actually liberating and useful. Because if you can drop all of the excessive self-importance and all of the long list of self-images and things that we're constantly putting on ourselves, that we have to be this and that and categorize and put ourselves in all these things, it's just a lot of mental gymnastics. If that just drops and you just say, I'm just not going to do that, energy levels go way up. Digestion improves, sleep improves, immune system improves, relationships improves, mood improves, emotional state, mental health, everything just improves magically. Because the reality is that is based on the fixation and the distortions, is oftentimes people are just causing their own misery because of their own distorted relationships and then the self-images and emphases they're putting on these things. Why I say that is because self-esteem and self-worth tends to be one of those things where it's like, if someone's like, oh, well, I can't do that because I don't really believe in myself and I can't do that until I believe in myself, so I need to do all these things to believe in myself so that I can do it. Or you could just do it. Because, like, no one ever actually really believes in themselves. And if they do, they're probably sociopaths or psychopaths. Because statistically, the people who do the best in the corporate and business world are psychopaths and sociopaths, because they have an exaggerated sense of self and they have no sense of empathy or real consequence for their action. Like, so it's actually a bit more normal to feel these things. But the question then becomes, are you just stuck on that, and is that tape is just looping? Or can you just say, like, okay, I just need to actually be focused on what I need to do and be staying focused on that. And then you kind of forget about it to where it's actually not a big deal. Because everyone has insecurities. Everyone feels insecure at times, different contexts, different situations, different competencies, different conscious and unconscious incompetencies, and all these things. But the bigger question is, who cares? It's not that big of a deal. Like, literally, who cares? Like, I feel like that is my response to the vast majority of anything that people regard as spiritual or conscious. Who cares? It, like, is so inconsequential and irrelevant and beside the point, and doesn't provide really any value or use or benefit to people. It just kind of makes people that are already a bit sicker, people that are already a bit neurotic, more neurotic. Or it gives sociopaths and psychopaths like an open door to do gnarly things to people, which history has shown categorically tends to happen in these worlds. So if you go on Instagram or any social media outlet, it's basically just comes down a lot of times just to self-worth. People are trying to medicate it and work through their journey of healing and journey of self-love and all of these things. But ultimately, all they're doing is just reinforcing their pre-existing insecurity. Because if you didn't feel insecure, you wouldn't need to post all day, every day about how you don't feel insecure. Like, if you're not hungry, you don't have to think about food. You know what I mean? Like, so the fact that your whole online persona, your whole identity, everything you're focusing quite a lot of your energy on during the day is about not being insecure or not valuing yourself. The fact that you have to let everyone know that you're doing something else just means that you're not. Because if it's an issue and it's forefront of your mind, then it's an issue because it's at the forefront of your mind, and it's at the forefront of your mind because it's an issue. And there's no amount of standing in front of a mirror and saying affirmations that's going to change that, because all that behavior is doing is just reinforcing the pre-existing thing. Which I know sounds a bit weird, but you just what you see. And it's just more and more levels of confusion to where it's like, now I was a drug addict, or I was depressed, that I had anxiety, and I didn't love myself, and I wasn't spiritual, and I wasn't conscious, and I was lost, and I didn't have a purpose, I didn't have any meaning. But now I discovered yoga, and I'm a vegan and vegetarian, and I'm a self-love coach, and I empower people to love themselves, and I found my mission and my purpose to do those things through those things. But then it's like, well, all of the result is just from this root cause. So it's still the root cause, and the root cause is just getting stronger. So the more you're identifying with not being the thing is the more you are identifying in actuality with the thing. So how is that really self-love? Or is it just more denial or more exaggeration? Because to me, self-love, if there is such a thing, is tend to be a bit more honest, a bit more straightforward. It's not very attractive. It's not very Instagram worthy. It's kind of just like, oh, I'm doing that. Oh, okay, well, I'm gonna not do that, or I'm gonna do something else. All right. Like, it can be that simple sometimes. But it's just these distortions is what underlies kind of a lot of the industry. And basically the thing is, to come back to the original point, is that these things just are what they are. They're not going to go anywhere. They don't need to be put on stilts. And they're not going to make anyone ever more conscious or spiritual or evolved or whatever, because they're just base desires, part of being a mammal, part of being a human being. And the more that you try to make those things other than what they are, is just creating more problems, more confusion, more distortion, and just kicking the can down the road. And actually just creates more exhaustion and just more and more problems. So it's just kind of a weird thing to observe as the world turns, let's say. And I can understand why people do it. I can understand the draw. I mean, it's basically what I did in my early 20s when I first got into this stuff, because that's just part of it. The reality is people are in pain and they don't want to be in pain. So something comes along and says, hey, we're going to melt away all of your stress and tension to make you a more spiritual, conscious being in only one weekend workshop. Obviously, you're going to be like, that sounds pretty good. And the guy is like really relaxed and everyone's nice and they seem to be having a good time, so it must be true. Maybe. So the last thing that to clarify is the stress response, because this is another thing people are like thinking is like a spiritual thing. It's just your stress response. So there's two sides of it. You could feel more chill, or you could feel more amped up and ramped up. So on the flip side, people are like, oh, I did this class and it was really relaxing, so that's spiritual. It's making me more spiritual. No, it just literally lowered your stress so you feel better, which is no small thing. Like, literally, it's no small thing. I mean, having a shitload of stress and then not having stress or having a lot less stress is amazing. There is no denying that. Stress sucks. It feels terrible. And if someone or something can help that diminish, incredible. But it's a bit dishonest to start being like, well, you know, this is an awakened path and a conscious path, and this is working with your chakras and your prana and your kundalini energy, and it's doing all these things. It's literally probably just some stretching and some breathing and guided visualization and whatever, which is not meditation, it's not spiritual, it's not yoga, it's not related to your chakras or your kundalini or shakti or prana at all. It's actually just literally what it is. Because if you really want to know what something is, just strip away all of the fantasy and all of the psychosis, and then actually just try to see it for what it is, or feel it and experience it for what it is. And then usually you can be like, oh, that's just what that is. Because things that aren't that are something else. So then this is a different thing. But then on the flip side, people will do the other extreme and like, oh, I did ecstatic dance and that's spiritual. No, it's just got your endorphins and your feel-good hormones going. Or again, back to all the drugs and all of those experiences. It's like, well, that's just stimulating your hormones to a strong degree in creating these experiences. That's it. I know that's a bit mundane or you know, like a bit of a wet blanket for people, but in actuality, that's what's happening. Because if that wasn't what was happening, then all of the other fantasy and propaganda and sales campaigns and all these things wouldn't be required. But they are required, and they often always go part and parcel. And there wouldn't be all of these other less than desirable psychic dynamics that are usually at play. So, overstimulation, it's nothing to do with being spiritual. You're just literally overstimulating your nervous system. A good example of this is when people think they're doing tantra and they're working with their kundalini sex energy, you're literally just heating your nerves. Like, that's it. And if you do that over a long enough period of time, nerves are going to cook. And then it's going to go, whoop, because that's how things work. Like, you can't go up always. But another major underlying mindset that is behind a lot of these things and why people get into it is this, it's a Peter Pan type of mindset. I never want to grow up. I want it to always be up, but never down. I want it to be good time all the time. I want to open my heart. I want to be a pure, enlightened light being and all these things. And it's like, that's just insanity. It just has doesn't make any sense at all. And it's just not real, like at all. Or on the flip side, you'll get the people who do that and they're like, oh wait, I forgot my shadow. I forgot the other parts of myself that I didn't include. So now I'm doing my shadow work and I'm including all the parts of myself that I didn't want to include because I realized I'm light, but I'm also dark. It's like, well, maybe that's a step in the right direction, but it's still taking an overemphasis and a fixation on subtle and not so subtle overstimulation on your nervous system and then just going deeper into it. So I'm doing processing and soul journeying and Akashic records and ancestral traumas and all these things. And it's just spinning deeper and deeper into that pre-existing imbalance and generally does not yield much at all, if not just, oh, well, I did have this stimulation of my nervous system, but now it's changed and it's this, and I like this one better, so it must be better and it must be working and it must be all the things that I heard that it was and that I believe that it is, that I know that it can and might and ought to be, so it must be true. It's like, I'm tired just thinking about it. That sounds really like a lot of work. So that's basically mostly everything from the base desires on Stilts. And I apologize if that sounded negative or harsh or critical at any juncture, but just trying to be honest in some capacity. If you don't agree, that's fine. You don't have to agree. It makes literally no difference to me if you agree or disagree. It's just my perspective, in my opinion, and it'll make sense to some people, and it probably won't to others. But if people are hearing it and getting emotional, then interesting. Could be actually in reality just agreeing. So going back to it, base desires, literally just base desires. And ultimately, perhaps what is a better step in the right direction is actually just developing a better and healthier relationship to those things, so they're just not a big deal. So they're not at the forefront and crowding out your mind, and you're not wasting so much time and energy trying to be something that you're not, or just basically beating yourself up, tying yourself up in knots, making yourself sick, and just literally abusing yourself, but then blaming it on society and the world and the government and the chemtrails and a whole laundry list of things, and just hopefully stop misappropriating things which can be helpful but can't be helpful because of the things that I just listed. So that's mostly my rant, but I'm gonna get into my questions here, because I have not I have had all these I have had all the questions or all the chats muted while I was talking because it's a bit distracting. So I'll start at the top. What are you drinking? I was drinking a 80s Shung Puer. I'm trying out this teapot, sampling a bunch of pots to maybe sell. So I was drinking an 80s Shung, which I'm starting to feel some pressure in my bladder. So I might have to let me see here. Let's see. There's a lot of that in my area. Canada, it's a world-class tourist destination. What does that mean? Tell me more about what that means. I wasn't sure the context. You just said it probably like half an hour ago. Just ordered some lion's mane. Can't wait. It's great, man. I've been doing the lion's mane every day, and it's such a good herb. I was just reading some studies the other day about how it can have neurotropic effects and help NGF and help regrow and heal the nervous system. It's pretty good. Let's see. What is your take on C60 purple? If that's carbon 60, I've heard of that a bit, but I've never taken it. I don't really have any interest in it because I don't, it's not really my, it's like C60 and astragaloside 4 and resveratrol, these types of things. I'm just not really cued in to these types of kind of trendy longevity substances. I mean, it's kind of one of those things we'll see. Like, you know, it's cool now, but let's give it 5-10 years and see what it is. But I've also never taken it. I haven't gone too deep into it. I usually just stick to straight herbs and internal practices. Let me see. Where's the question? Here we go. Why are your videos always about dissing people who are delusional rather than providing novel information? Well, a couple of reasons. First is my videos always aren't about that because I have almost 700 on the channel. Quite a lot of them do provide novel information. I have over 100 hours of classes that I had taught on Hyperion Academy, which provided novel information. I've got lots of articles online which provide novel information. I have lots of videos that provide novel information. I mean, I could pretty much keep going. And I think it's a bit of an understatement and a little bit of a dismissal to be like, oh, you're dissing people who are delusional rather than providing novel information. The other part of that is I'm not dissing them. I'm making a point about a certain belief or a certain behavior or a certain approach or a certain system and pointing out these are perhaps assumptions associated around that which are not correct, and then they lead to these consequences which I'm deeming as perhaps not that desirable. I'm not saying that these are bad people. I'm not saying that they don't have a right to do what they're doing. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing because I don't have the right to do that because I'm not them. Like people, we each have to make our own mistakes. We have to live our own lives. And for me to necessarily presume that I know exactly what that is for another person is not true, so I don't do it. And I'm also not fucking Eckhart Tolle or some self-help guru. It's basically like I have a perspective, I have information. I try to present that in a way that is clear and makes sense. It makes sense to me. And then if someone wants to say, oh, there's something there for me, let me make that have meaning in my own life. Let me unpack that for myself. Let me reflect upon that. Let me do some degree of self-inquiry or self-awareness or self-reflection, or take some accountability or responsibility or investment in my own sovereignty as a person. Then that's ideally what I would prefer because, and honestly, that's what I do. That's how I operate. The people that I've learned from have been my teachers. They talk to me very conceptually, kind of similar to how I do, where they'll have a point, have a perspective, use things to illustrate it, and then leave it up to me to either A, understand it, or B, not understand it. Or if I don't understand it, then try to understand it, give it time, give it energy, investment on my part. They've never held my hand necessarily or been like, oh, you should do this and you should do that. Like, it's never been how it's been taught. To me. So that's just not how I function. And because I don't know, like if I'm talking to thousands of people that might watch my video, how could I necessarily recommend the same thing for everyone? How could I know everyone's situation? It's not really a possibility. So to say that I'm dissing people and I'm only being negative is really kind of short-sighted and missing the point of what I'm saying. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, or something doesn't make sense, or something isn't clear, then say, hey, can you explain this more? I don't quite understand. Hey, this doesn't make sense. Can you explain this more? Because that's what I do. If I hear something and I don't understand it, then I say, I don't understand that. I don't say, this person's a jerk. This person's mean. I don't like what they're saying. I say, well, maybe I don't get it. Maybe I need to ask a question, or maybe I need to give it time. Or maybe it's not the right information for me. Maybe it's not relevant. Maybe I don't care. Maybe it's not a perspective that I want to have in my life. And that's my right as an individual, as an adult, to make those decisions and ascertain those things for myself. So that's basically how I think and how I believe and how I live my own life. So of course that's reflected in videos. And I have quite a lot of legit information and exercises and specific things for people. But also at the end of the day, if someone wants to help themselves and work through something, literally no one can do that for them. Like, it's also part of the reason why, for example, I had the Inner Door Herbs website, and that was short-lived and was actually slightly a mistake on my part, because let's say I'd suffered quite a lot, just hypothetically. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but let's just say I did. Invested a lot of time and energy and sacrifice and commitment and dedication and blood, sweat, and tears and all these things. Let's say I'd invested all those things and I'd been through all these experiences, hardship, trials and tribulations, etc. And then eventually got to a place to where I could be open to having a relationship or having these types of things in my life. So then what happened was I created this website, and in essence, I was basically allowing people to bypass all of those things and just directly access something of insane quality, value, rarity, scarcity, etc. And it's just not a good thing. It's not a functional thing to do, hence why the website had to go and how those products will never be sold again. And that's just kind of a principle that underlies a lot of things that I don't think a lot of people like or necessarily want to hear or agree with, but the people that I've learned from that have taught me, that's how they've taught me, that's what they've told me, and I think that's how their teachers taught them, and I think that's how things have worked and functioned for quite a long time. So in many ways, there's only so much you can do for another person, and there's only so much that you can control as an individual. So as an individual, I can control to a degree about my own life and my own actions. So I can work on myself as much as I can and invest a lot in myself. I can try to be articulate and clear and communicate and convey things in a way that is simple and easy to understand, hopefully. But that's mostly all that I can do. I can't control how people interpret it or what they think or what they feel or where they take it or how they don't take it, because it would be really unhealthy and not realistic in any way, shape, or form. So to me, I think that's just kind of a pretty weak critique. I'm always dissing people who are delusional. It's just really like not the case whatsoever. So anyways, hopefully answers that question. It gets old eventually. I mean, honestly, if it gets old and you don't like what I'm saying, literally no one's making you watch my videos. Like, that's what always confused me when people will critique or post hateful or negative comments on my videos. I'm like, dude, you're an adult. No one's making you be here. If you don't like it, there's tons of stuff you can do with your time. But if you're going to try to tell me how I should be or how I shouldn't be, that's really kind of not respectful in any way, shape, or form. Anyways, next question. Hi, should I quit my job and start my own business? Honestly, can't say I recommend that in any way, shape, or form, because people might look at people who have businesses and they're like, oh, I like the end result of that. I like how that looks. But if they actually knew what went into it and what happened behind the scenes, then they might not feel the same way. Like, a common question that I've gotten a lot over the years is like, hey man, I want to start an herb business too. How do you how do you recommend I get started and like start my own herb business? Because you're doing it, it looks cool, so I want to do it myself. I'm like, well, you know, the way I did it was I basically had no money for probably my whole life up until 2010 or something like that. So I had a business for many years and had literally no money and worked all the time because I didn't know jack about business beforehand. So there was periods of years where I was in like 6, 8 hours a day learning about things. And I'm still in that period. It's just about other things. People were like, oh, I like what that looks like. I want that. It's like, well, do you want to dedicate your whole life to it? Do you want to never have a day off? Do you want to never be done? Do you want to be completely responsible for your income? Have no one to blame, have no safety net, have no fallback, have no one to look at if you fail other than yourself? Do you want that? Like, if so, starting a business and being an entrepreneur is for you, because with the risk, there is reward if you can succeed. But the fact of the matter is the vast majority of people do not. I think the vast majority of businesses fail. That's just life, which is unfortunate. So I can't really recommend it. And I especially would not recommend just being like, I want to start an herb company. I like herbs. I'm going to do this. Or I like natural health, so I'm going to do natural health. It's like, from a business perspective, not a good scene. Not a good scene in the sense of like, not a good approach, not a good sound mindset in terms of business. So would not recommend it. If you wanted to like start getting other streams of incomes going on while you have your job, that's a bit smarter, and that is more recommended, because then you still have your income, then you still have your fallback. It's kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk talked about that a lot, was like, yeah, do your 9 to 5, and then from like 7 to 10 or 7 to midnight, you need to be doing your other thing. So if you're down to like work 80, 90, 100 hours a week, then go for it. I mean, I don't really recommend it. Let's see. So I want to answer all these other questions, and I will, but can you guys hold on for like 60 seconds? I really got to pee. Like, I drank so much tea, and I really need to pee because it like really hurts, and I can't hold it. And I also don't want to just take the iPad to the bathroom. That'd be a little bit weird. I'd probably get banned from YouTube. So give me like 60 seconds. I'm gonna leave the live stream going, but I for real gotta go to the bathroom. So I will be right back. Stay where you are, or go get some water or some tea or something. Give yourself a nice beverage. But I'll be right back. It'd be funny if I left my mic on and then you heard me in the bathroom. I've seen that happen at events before, actually, where the presenter forgot to take their mic off. All right, 60 seconds. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Didn't lose too many viewers. They're probably like, where the hell is this guy? It's live streaming a wall or something. Let me get this mic back on. So let me catch back up on the questions. Now that I can actually breathe. Can you still hear me okay? Just want to make sure my mic is still functional and it didn't die. So let me get back up to the questions. Let's see. In light of what you've been saying, what practices do you recommend for the lay person? Just the standard eat, move, sleep well. Again, I think it depends. And like I said, it would be a mistake to assume that I was saying that these things are bad. Like, oh, he's saying I shouldn't do yoga, I shouldn't meditate, I shouldn't do all these things. I literally did not say those words. And to say that I did is not correct. I pointed out specific errors and exaggerations and then said that those things were errors and exaggerations. So you can do anything, do whatever, but just drop the fantasy and the nonsense and all the extraneous self-hypnosis, and then those things will probably most likely work even better than if you had all of the self-hypnosis. So it's kind of, honestly, it's kind of annoying on a personal level when you say things, but what people hear is, oh, he's saying it's bad. I'm like, well, I didn't say those words. I didn't say you shouldn't do it. I literally said, here's this error in thought or approach, and perhaps here's another way of looking at it, or here's something to remove. So those are two different things, and I think it's just a way of thinking and relating to things. And I think one of the most helpful things that a person could do to be more intelligent or more functional is actually stop looking at things from this like a narrow good bad point of view and actually start to understand bigger pictures with certain things. So hopefully that helps. Any advice for people who are lonely / isolated or just forming quality relationships in general? I quit drinking and ended a long-term relationship 1 year ago and my social life has greatly diminished. I think part of it is to just do it, which, you know, as an adult, sometimes it is tricky. Like for me, for example, I don't have a job. I don't have any enforced social relations or social networks. If I chose to, I could literally be alone in my apartment and like never talk to anyone. But obviously I don't choose that because that's not very healthy and it sounds kind of like a bummer. But how I did meet people is just doing events and things in the city around interests, things that I was interested in or things of that nature. For me, it was tea. Met people through that and met a lot of cool people and made friends, and that was that. So meetup groups and whatever random events in your community is a good way to perhaps start meeting people, or also you could just do online dating. Those are all things. I don't know if that answers your questions or you wanted more stuff, but part of it is just kind of getting out of your own way and just getting out and doing it and not staying stuck in that place. If that makes sense. Next question. I am excited to get the Vitality Zeolite drops I ordered last week. Awesome. Me too. I'm having some right now actually in my water, and definitely a big fan. And I think more people need to be on those because they're so good, but I guess that's why I made like 5 or 6 videos about that. But anyways, thanks for ordering. Hope you like them. I guess let me know what you think. But definitely pay attention to how your body feels, and you could, start off slow and work your way up, let's say. Next question is, you tend to come across as though your mood is not great. Can you describe what your general mood is like? I suppose it may not correlate linearly with the behavioral output. I feel like I will often laugh or smile in quite a lot of my videos, or like crack myself up. So I don't know what that really means. I think maybe it's like, maybe people believe that if you have frustration or you're kind of like not a big fan of certain things, that means you're somehow like unhappy or somehow like deficient or defective as a person. But that is absurd. It's like, you're a human being talking on YouTube, but it's weird because you don't seem like you're just 100% happy. It's like, what? Like if you said it to a person on the street, hey, I noticed you're walking down the street, you're listening to your iPhone, you know, looking at your phone, but it just seems like maybe you're not in you're not in a great mood. The person's gonna be like, dude, who are you? I'm just walking down the street, like on my phone. What are you talking about? And the other side of that is obviously, yeah, maybe I do have frustration. Maybe I do have annoyance. Maybe I can feel upset. What a revelation. A human being having feelings. I mean, oh my God. Here's this guy on YouTube talking about things that sometimes aren't always just happiness and like fairies and rainbows. What a novel idea. So I don't know, man. I don't really know. What was the other question? What's your general mood like? Generally, my mood is pretty neutral and even keel. Like anyone, I can get stressed. Like business stuff or work stuff or whatever can be like, oh fuck, ugh, I gotta get this done. Or like, I wanted this thing to happen, but it didn't happen, so now I'm pissed. I mean, yeah, that can definitely happen, but generally, for the most part, my life's pretty dope. And it's all pretty much exactly like I had designed it to be many years ago. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question or really what you're getting at, but it's kind of a pretty weak critique of someone. But it's a very common one because the vast majority, a lot of the critiques that I've received on YouTube oftentimes are just passive-aggressive personal attacks, straight-up aggressive personal attacks, or some dude trying to have an intellectual, like, pissing contest, or someone thinking that I'm presenting myself as some type of like authority or expert or guru or some type, which I've never done, because it's not true. Like, I'm a person on YouTube. I say things that make sense to me and help me out, things that I've invested a lot of time and energy in, share them with people. Sometimes they help people, and then people write me emails or whatever and say, hey, okay, I wasn't necessarily assuming your questions were critiques. I'm just making an example on similar, like other things that people have said. But yeah, okay. But it's just kind of funny because there's definitely been a handful of people over the years that are like, want to debate. Oh, let's meet up on Skype and I'm gonna show you that you're wrong. I'm like, dude, what? Like, if you don't like what I'm saying, just click off. If you don't agree, then don't agree. But people expect to be like, I don't agree with you, I think you're wrong. And I'm supposed to be like, well, hold on a minute. You have to agree. You have to think I'm right. I'm like, that's cool. It's fine with me. You don't have to agree at all. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense. But it's a strange world on the YouTubes, and also on the internet, where people feel empowered with the anonymity of being behind a keyboard, or people feel empowered of some fake idea of authority or power, and they try to create a facade or some persona or some version of themselves as different than how they actually are. Versus pretty much how I am right now is pretty much how I am like any other time, but obviously a bit more probably quiet and chill for the most part. Let's see. But sometimes if I seem like I'm annoyed or frustrated, it's because I'm probably annoyed or frustrated. Which, to assume that because I'm annoyed or frustrated for maybe however many minutes that I'm on a YouTube video, to assume, oh, you must just be like that all the time, that's a bit of a stretch. Like, because it's like if you were in a in industry for so long, it's kind of natural at a certain point to be like, yeah, these things are working, these things aren't. These are effective strategies, these are not effective strategies. And then you would adapt and try to change and choose better strategies for yourself. Yeah, I'm not into the quote, be positive at all costs and happy all the time. To me, that stuff's just really stupid. Like, it's just like, okay, so you're what, 12, 9? Like you're playing dollhouse and tea house, but like real life adult. I mean, I don't know. It just is not a very interesting point of view or perspective. So part of the reason if I do seem frustrated or annoyed is like literally dealing with lots of people who are in la la land. And it's like in all honesty, when I first, let's say, moved to the West Coast, in my mind I was like, this is going to be great, because I'm from the Midwest, and no one's conscious here, no one's woke. People are, they're Midwest. So I'm like, oh, West Coast, man, it's going to be great. So what I found out very quickly is that generally a lot of the, let's just say, liberals or conscious people that I was encountering were just dumber than the people that I'd left. And that became frustrating and annoying because it was just a level of psychosis and delusion that I had not yet encountered. And so it took me a little bit to like, whoa, this is next level. Like, so that became frustrating because I did generally want to connect with people, but wasn't able to. Or I thought we were doing one thing, but then it turned out we were doing another. So I felt maybe misled or betrayed or hurt in some way. So in actuality, if I seem frustrated or annoyed, it's because in reality, I'm a human being. I'm a sensitive person sometimes, or maybe at least I was. But for the most part, I'm generally not very annoyed or frustrated anymore because I just don't care. I mean, ultimately, it's kind of what it comes down to. And, I eventually did meet people that were really cool, people that I vibed with, people that are great, and I have great relationships, many good friendships, and people in my life that I'm close to and have a lot in common with. So this is part of a learning curve and a growing phase. But I'm gonna close this lamp, or not lamp. I'm also gonna close the lamp, close the shade a little bit because the sun was abusing. The sun was doing a microaggression on my. I didn't even help at all. Made it worse. The sun's doing a microaggression on my face, and I don't appreciate it. The sun's oppressing me with its masculine energy. Okay, that's better. So I don't know, hopefully that answers that question, but ultimately I'm not really understanding the basis of the question in the first place. It's like, you're a person that has feelings, but it doesn't make sense to me because you're on YouTube. So again, if I miss something or I don't understand what you're saying, please clarify. If I say something that you don't understand, will you read a Reddit thread of my choice out loud in an exchange for super chat? Absolutely not. Because I won't. So unless you want to do it for like $5,000, then I will, but otherwise I just don't. It's not what we're about here. Let's see. Where's the next question? Try to get back to something a little more like relevant. I've been watching your journey evolution since 2012. Yeah, that shit's crazy. The other side of it is like being on YouTube for 10 years. Oh my God. Like, who is that person? And then just like listening to some of the stuff that I would say, I'm just like, whew, I'm glad time moves on. Like, I'm glad we can grow. Yeah, in my opinion, Reddit is just a waste of time. I've never actually, yeah, I'm not going to spend any time on there. But if you want to read the Reddit thread out loud to yourself, you can, but I'm not going to read it by myself on here. Let's see. Can I beta test your eucomia bark? I do manual labor and joint tissue pain is my #1 health issue. I think I can get it. I think I might have some here. If you want to email me through the website, maybe I can get you maybe like 50 grams or 25 grams to play with. Unless, are you the one someone's been hassling me about, oh yeah, Bentino, that's it. That guy, thank you, that was very helpful. I can never remember that guy's name. I don't know why. Probably, I mean, who cares about his name? He's a pretty forgettable figure in my book, but, oh yeah, let's see, yeah, it's questions. Oh yeah, so if you want to test the eucomia, just send me an email. Thoughts on rhodiola rosea? I think it can be good. It's a bit drying. It's a bit harsh. I don't think it's actually an adaptogen as in the way people claim it to be, nor do I necessarily think it's a tonic herb, but I think it can be good and useful in short bursts, but I don't think it's quite what people think it is. I think a lot of the times people throw around adaptogen too casually, or, oh, I think everything's a tonic herb, but it isn't. People don't really understand these terms. They don't understand actually Chinese medicine or herbology. So you kind of have to be like, are we using the sort of pop word tonic herb, or using like actually the Chinese herbal classification, or using the actual pop adaptogen, where it's like, oh, everything's an adaptogen, or like people say like pine pollen and deer antler velvet's an adaptogen. It isn't. They say it's a tonic herb. It isn't. It's like a medicinal substance. Anyways, so rhodiola can be good, I guess, if you're doing like, lots of manual labor or these types of things, but in my opinion, it's not what people say it is. That's part of the reason why I don't sell it, and it tastes kind of bad. Like, it's a pretty astringent, like, weird flavor. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know. Probably doing what I'm doing now. Just hopefully in a better way. So I definitely more business success, more success in my internal training, deeper relationships with my friends and family and loved ones, better health, more strength and vitality, these kinds of things. That's about as specific as I can be, but that's also just what I'm doing now. So that's laying the foundation for the future. Let's see. I'm trying to go to the next question. Are you omnipresent? Really? I will say though, I banned someone last time that I was on the live stream because they kept asking really vulgar and ridiculous questions that were like just stupid. And probably they would have been funny to me if I was 12, but it was just this never-ending thread of absurd questions. So I straight up banned them, which I have a pretty liberal ban policy on my YouTube channel, where like if someone's just straight up hateful or negative, it's like automatically gone, because I really don't care. Like, I don't have any space to deal with that in my life, and I don't excuse anyone who feels that it's okay to behave in those ways. I'm not saying that your question is like that, but it just reminded me of it from last week. So just not really into it. I just don't see any excuse to be hateful or nasty to someone, especially some stranger over the keyboard. Like, it's just dumb. Next question. What do you think happens after death? I don't know. I can't remember. I will say there's a very clear path and process that is mapped out within Chinese medicine and other philosophical systems, which we can get into the complexities of various Hun, various Po, various aspects of our self. Some go back to the earth, some transmigrate. So basically what I will say is that within, let's say, Buddhist stuff, if you believe you have an individual soul, then you're already trapped in samsara. That's just kind of what they say. And I think our understanding of self in the West and in the modern world is kindergarten at best, laughable, pathetic. Like, it's not very good. So therefore our understanding of what comes after that is subsequently not good. So that's what I think, based on all of the research and study of these things that I've done and my own experience. But I just think another thing is pretty much all the Eastern traditions are like, anything that you can be aware of has nothing to do with what you actually are. So two fun-filled facts. But ultimately, I think, if I were to be honest, I think the vast majority, basically we're all just trapped in samsara and we're just going to be reborn, reincarnated endlessly. Like, that's just kind of the view. And karma is a parasitic force which is feeding on all of us all the time, and we're basically slaves to it. We're slaves to our desires, we're slaves to our habits and habitual tendencies. And ultimately, we're just going to be born and we're going to die, and hopefully we will not move too far back karmically, but at very best, we might very slightly make a positive adjustment. But in actuality, the vast majority of people will not make much progress, but that's not my opinion. That's just what I've been taught in terms of karma and stuff from these traditions. Take it or leave it. Theanine supplement any good? Sure, yeah. I mean, it's cheap, has nice effects. Definitely high quality tea is better, but I've taken plenty of L-theanine in my life, and it can definitely have a nice effect on the cognition, especially for the price point and the ease of access. Does vitality decrease as we age significantly? Well, normally, yes. But does it have to? No. Basically, we can maintain our vitality up until the day we die. We can maintain our flexibility and elasticity and strength and cognition and all these things up until we die. This has been understood for a long time. The reason why people decline as they get older is because they were fucked up and they're just getting more fucked up. This is the view from basically, let's just say, Chinese philosophy. Because they had their distorted functions and patterns and belief systems, and then over time those just get driven deeper and deeper into the body, so the tissue structures become more rigid and more fixed, so people get tighter, and then obviously it takes more energy to maintain that, and also the body is getting weaker and less efficient, so you have a dual decline kind of happening. But then based on the mind-body connection, it just keeps spiraling and feeding itself. So then that is the normal aging process, meaning they were fucked up, so they get more fucked up, and then they die. That's kind of a crass way to put it, but that is, quote, the normal process. And to intervene with that, to change that, is not particularly easy. It's not necessarily for the faint of heart, depending on how much you want to change that, but it can be done. It has been done. It is doable. It's just not necessarily easy, and it's not like something a yoga class is necessarily going to provide. It can do some to a degree, but there's a lot of other factors at play. It's not as simple as we might think. But I will say quite a lot of it has to do with quality of the mind and quality of our actual tissues and the elasticity and tensegrity of those things. Can you describe what TCM says about male pattern baldness? I don't quite remember. I haven't really studied it much. I think part of it is predetermined and genetic. There's nothing you can do about it. Part of it might be related to lifestyle, but to say that it's absolutely fixed would be a mistake. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make when they misinterpret and misunderstand Chinese medicine. Like, oh, I have gray hair. Oh, it's because of this. Or, oh, this happens, so it's because of this Jing thing. It's like, well, maybe, but you kind of need to be a lot more educated and informed diagnostically to be able to make those claims and assumptions. Because many of these things are not as simple as we might like them to be. There's a lot of factors. And there's also ultimately some things that we just can't change. I mean, it's just part of the beast. Some things we can, some things are just fixed, predetermined before birth. That was a question about rhodiola. I did answer that question already about rhodiola. And then what can you say about ashwagandha? Pretty much the same thing I said about rhodiola. They both can be useful and helpful and are good herbs, but they are not necessarily tonic herbs or adaptogens like people say that they are. People that say that those herbs are those things are generally using a pop definition of those terms or some general eclectic usage of those terms, not really a technical or functional definition. But they're both great herbs, but I don't think they're tonics. I don't think they're necessarily adaptogens in those ways, but they can definitely be helpful and useful for people. So that's what I would say about it. Any opinion on kombucha? Personally, I don't really like it anymore. There's one company called Lionheart that I like occasionally because it has no sugar, like literally 0 grams or 1 gram. I think kombucha is one of these things that became trendy and it's a little bit overhyped and exaggerated in its health benefits, but definitely can be beneficial, but can also just be way too sugary and also way too acidic and actually damage people's enamel and cause some blood sugar issues as well, just from all the sugar. So that's my opinion, but you know, a little bit's fine. So every now and again, no big deal, but you know, guzzling it all the time or saying it's like an immortality tool is an exaggeration, I would say. My scalp is hard, not movable. Is yours? Apparently that is supposed to be a correlation between that and baldness. I've never heard that. I mean, so I don't know. Maybe if the tissue is fixed, the skincare is not, you know, there. I don't know. I don't have the information to say that. Can you talk about skincare? Do you use sunscreen? Useful or not? No, I never use sunscreen really. But I have a skin type to where I can get really dark if I choose to, and I can count on one hand the times I've been sunburned in my life. But some people are not like that. Some people have very, very fair, sensitive skin. So obviously sunscreen or something like that could probably be useful or helpful. The way I look at the sun is like kind of like lifting weights. Meaning, let's say I haven't lifted weights in 6 months, haven't been out in the sun in 6 months. So I'm like, oh, it's sunny. I'm just gonna go out and do it for 8 hours. Oh my God, I got sunburned. Really? You got sunburned? I can't imagine why. You took a stressor or a stimulus that you haven't been exposed to in a long time and you just maxed it out. Can't imagine why your body had a strong reaction. So I view it more kind of like that, where maybe you work your way into it, ease your way in, and it is in some ways a stressor on your body, so you just adjust accordingly. And then also you have to know your skin type and know your own ability to handle the sun. And it's different for people. It's also different depending on where you are on the planet, in relation to the equator, I think, or in relation to the strength of the UV index or various levels of pollution. But definitely taking, antioxidants and things like that could probably be helpful and useful. So yeah, I might not be the best person to take sunscreen advice from, because I've not really been burned very much in my life. Are there any herbs that are said to be good but are bad? Honestly, things like derantler and pine pollen and like tongkat ali, yohimbe, herbs like that. Horny goatweed is also one. People are like, oh, they're adaptogens, they're tonic herbs. No, they're literally not. Or like derantler velvet, like that's a strong hormonal supplement. Pine pollen, strong hormonal supplement. Yohimbe and things like that, not tonic herbs, not adaptogens. Tongkat ali, these can jack your hormones up, can throw you out of balance, for sure. Especially if you already have yin deficiency or other types of conditions. So those are some things that come to mind. I would say they're bad, but I would say that they need to be used with more caution and a more delicate hand than they are probably used quite often. So hopefully that makes sense. If you want opinions on other specific herbs, feel free to lay them in there. So what is your diet like? What is your main caloric staple? Main caloric staple? I don't know. I'll tell you what I had today. This morning for breakfast, I had 1 egg, 2 pieces of sausage, roasted root vegetables, some stewed greens, or sauteed greens, and some avocado. That was breakfast. For lunch, I had 3 chicken tacos with some guacamole. There's cabbage on there, some cheese, and some sauce. For dinner, I don't know what I'll have, actually. I haven't thought about it. But probably something, 'cause I'm pretty hungry. My diet is not typically, quote, healthy. I just try to have whatever I do consume to be of good quality and from good places. And I also had a coffee this morning with butter and MCT oil and a bunch of lion's mane and reishi spore oil. So that's mostly what I eat. It's pretty boring, pretty simple, but that's like what I like to eat. I've been vegan, I've been raw vegan, I've been vegetarian, I've been paleo, I've done lots of permutations, and now I just kind of don't worry about it. I just eat to feel good and satisfied, and yeah, that's it. I just can't really be bothered. Let's see. What are your thoughts on magic numbers synchronicity? Is it simply confirmation bias or something more? Personally, I don't ever pay attention to it, so I don't ever really see it anymore. But coincidentally, when I did pay attention and I did think it was a cool thing, I did see it more. So it's kind of another one of those things that I just, to me, it's not really relevant. I don't think it's like it's a message from your guardian angels. It's a message from the cosmos, like it's a message from blah, blah, blah. I just don't think that's true. It's like, can be funny or fascinating, but I literally never pay attention to it or think about it at all anymore. Just because it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't see the value anymore. I think it's just kind of another one of those new agey type things, which maybe it's a bit of a bummer, but I'm like, oh, that's cute, but makes no difference. I took elk antler for a while. It's supposed to be good for bones and cartilage. I had my back broken. I'm not sure if it did anything. I mean, yeah, if you need a situation like that where you maybe want like a lot of growth factors or something, makes sense. If you're just like a 22-year-old dude spending 8 hours a day on your computer and then like gaming it up and then trying to like do no fap or something, makes no sense. So like I said, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just like to say, oh, it's an adaptogen, it's a tonic herb, and everyone should take it, and it's just a great all-around supplement. That's not true, and that's kind of irresponsible for people to say. But yeah, if you need some serious growth factors, then boom. What do people in real life generally estimate your age to be? I don't know. I haven't asked anyone in quite a while, to be honest. I think probably like around 30, somewhere around there. I don't know. Have not asked. It's a good question, though, I guess. I guess I'll just never really think about it, or anytime I think about how old I am, I have to think and remember. Like, oh yeah, it's this year, so I have to do the math. Okay, that's what it is. I just never think about it. It's not very important to me. Any thoughts on adrenal cortex or adrenal glandular supplements? Yeah, I think glandulars and organs can be good supplements. Also, in terms of like eating meat, for example, like what we eat in modern times in the West is actually what the rich would give to the poor back in the day. Like, because it's the least nutritious part, because it's just the muscle. Back in the day, what people valued were the organs, the glands, and the kind of like really fatty, juicy bits, because that's where like the most of the nutrition was. The muscle's just muscle, not a lot in there. It's just like, okay, it's just protein. So it's just funny that we don't include any of these things in our diet anymore. But you know, the Weston A. Price people and that whole school of thought is definitely really into organs and glandulars. I haven't really taken any in many years, but perhaps I will, because some people believe it provides like the growth factors, or not growth factors, but the precursors. There's a certain term for it that I can't remember, but it provides like the precursors to help your body rebuild and regenerate your own organs in a better way. So definitely, I can't remember the brand that I used to get, but I think they can be useful supplements. Maybe I'll get some, actually. It sounds kind of good, actually. I'm thinking about it. In Carol K. Anthony I Ching, she often refers to the sage and the helpers. Are these literal entities that we are courting for the favor of by being sincere and benevolent? Probably just literal aspects of your own awareness is how I would look at it. I wouldn't say necessarily it's an independent entity that's just like hanging out over here. It's like you got one on one shoulder and one on the other. It's probably just aspects of your own mind and your own awareness, and how your awareness is influencing a situation. Because chi is really about relationship a lot of the times. Like, people think it's energy, but that's the worst definition and the worst way to understand that term. If you look at it more in terms of relationship, that's actually a better, closer way to start looking at it. Relationship and functionality, like what's the function of the relationship and what's the outcomes of the relationship and the approach and the quality of the relationship and how are these things interacting. So that's a bit more closer, I would think. A lot of people are going all beef. Any thoughts? What does that mean? Like people just on like 100% beef diet, or they only eat meat from beef? Can you explain a bit more? I know there are people who would argue that eating those types of animals, I can't remember the term, ruminant, eating ruminants is like a natural thing for us, historically and biologically. So maybe that's why they're really into cows. I don't know. So you could perhaps share a bit more about what that actually means. How to work through low self-worth from years of brainwashing. I think I talked about that in the beginning of the live stream quite a lot. Maybe you missed it, but I would recommend watching the recording because I talked through self-worth stuff as one of the base desires. But there's really no way to work through it because that's not the right question. It's not the right approach. It basically just comes down to taking different actions and systematically taking bigger and bigger actions. And because there's never going to really be a point where you're like, all my self-worth issues are done. Now I just feel perfectly full of worth. So now I can go live the life that I want to live. It's not how it works. It's basically just kind of forgetting about it, putting it to the side and just getting shit done, moving, and just doing things, but then also having some degree of self-reflection and awareness to start to see how that is distorting or influencing your behavior. But mostly it's just, that's all that is required. So, because there's one thing that people misunderstand about, like, let's say traumas or negative energy, right? People think it's like there's a quantitative amount. That's incorrect. It is actually a qualitative amount. It's not even an amount. It's a qualitative impact in how your quality of your mind and your physiology is adjusted in reflecting that quality. So it's more about adjusting the quality. It's not about, I gotta like fix this thing or get out this thing. Because people will be like, how can I get rid of all my trauma, resolve all my trauma? It's like, it's not the right question really. Because it's not like you have 12.7 grams of trauma and then you have 7.8 grams of self-worth issues, then you have 0.7 grams of happiness, and then it's like, it's not really how it works. Like, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to knock that down to 10 grams of trauma. Oh, I feel better now. I'm going to keep knocking down to 7 grams. It's not a quantitative aspect. It's a qualitative adjustment, which is a bit tricky, let's say. It's not necessarily the easiest thing because it's all wound up in who we are. And usually what we need to do is not what we want to do, and what we want to do is oftentimes what we need to not do. Because it gets into like a bit of a dodgy territory, which is oftentimes why people have teachers or mentors, someone who actually has an objective perspective, because sometimes you can trust your own, sometimes you're just operating from pure distortion. So it's the thing is discernment and reflection and actually dedication and investment to be able to develop those qualities, to be able to see when you're actually just deceiving yourself or when you're actually doing something that's correct and beneficial and upright. So hopefully that makes sense and answers your questions a bit. But also I think it's helpful to get over the idea that there's like this fixed A and B, like, oh, I have self-worth issues here, but if I don't have them here, then my life will be whatever. And that's necessarily perhaps a little bit unrealistic because you're a human being. So if you have no self-worth issues and you have no self-doubt, then you're probably a sociopath or a psychotic person. So having some is actually normal. To get rid of it is not real or natural. To get over the fixation and the obsession with it, that is probably a bit more useful and beneficial. 100% beef and water, like Jordan Peterson. Oh yeah, I remember. I thought that was what I thought of when I heard the question. I mean, if it helped them, for sure. But who knows if that's specifically what helped them, or just the removal of literally everything else is what helped them. Who really knows? I don't know. But obviously it did help them and they feel better, so that's good. But let's give it 10 years and they might have to make adjustments, and hopefully, you know, they will if they need to, but don't necessarily recommend it. But I'm also not really well versed on it. And I think there was a Joe Rogan clip where Rogan was talking to Peterson about his 100% meat diet or whatever. Do you know anything about Andy Cutler Mercury Detox Protocol? I don't. I have not heard of it. But in terms of detoxing mercury, I think the zeolites that I have on Hyperion are probably one of the better options. That's what's been shown from, let's say, urine tests and lots of anecdotal experiences and testimonials. So that's kind of what I tend to lean towards, because too often so many of these protocols just stir a bunch of stuff up and don't effectively bind things out. So that's my answer. I find that I feel good eating ruminant liver daily. What would this mean from a Chinese medicine perspective? I mean, pretty much that you feel good from it, so that's it. I mean, I think that's just what it would mean. I mean, if you want someone to take your pulse and, you know, diagnose your organs, then they can do that. But ultimately, if you eat it and it feels good, then keep doing it until it doesn't feel good or you don't feel like eating it anymore. It sounds like a good thing. But I would say, yeah, liver is very nutritious, and yeah, it's probably would make a lot of people feel really good, to be honest. Whenever I stopped being vegetarian, the first thing I ate was an entire bison liver. I remember I went to the store, bought the bison liver, dropped it in, sauteed it up, and ate the whole thing right on the spot, and felt great. And that was like, yeah, not vegetarian anymore. Yeah, so let's see. Can I paste a short story here and have you read it? No. You said, can I post a Reddit thread and will you read it? No. Can I post a short story here and have you read it? No. So you can keep asking the same question in a different way, but I'm going to continually either ignore it or decline it explicitly. Let's see. Did I miss some questions? Let's see. Need some more questions coming in here. Oh, how bad is smoking really, and how to quit? Yeah, smoking is bad. I think that's pretty well established at this point in history. I think how you quit is just quit. I don't know. I've never smoked cigarettes, so I don't have a personal experience. I did smoke a lot of weed for a lot of years. And how I stopped smoking weed was I just stopped smoking weed. It's like when I decided to be vegetarian, I just decided to be vegetarian and I no longer wanted meat. When I decided to not be vegetarian, I just stopped being vegetarian and started eating meat. But that's how I functioned and how I did things. But how I was able to stop desiring weed was filled my life with things that were more nourishing and interesting. Specifically, once I got onto reishi and like cacao, I was like, weed's a joke. Like, I'm eating blue-green algae and spirulina and bee pollen and cacao and reishi mushroom, and I feel a million times better than I ever did on weed. So I'm done with that shit, and I never looked back. So that's one strategy, is perhaps fill your life with other things that are way more positive and nourishing and beneficial, and then perhaps it will cancel out the other stuff. Or you'll start feeling better, so then you'll start to really notice how crappy you feel from the thing. Because once you start feeling really crappy from something, you'll probably want to stop. It's funny, it's usually how that works. So it's sometimes good to make you feel worse, so then you'll actually stop doing it. Because if it's still a positive thing and it still feels really good, then you'll probably keep doing it, because who doesn't want to do things that feel good? So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Eating brain makes me feel great. Eyes even more. I've never actually eaten eyes or brain. Not to say I wouldn't, but I just never have. I'm not that crazy of a carnivore, I guess. Dang, you ate a whole bison liver in one go. That's crazy. Livers taste so strong. To me, it just tasted like steak. I mean, I just sauteed it with like salt and pepper. It had been frozen for a while, so I don't know if that minimized it or something, but I just kind of ate the whole thing and it was good. But I also hadn't had meat in like 4 years, so maybe I was just maybe I was just starved. Let's see. Yeah, get tea tree toothpicks and chew those when you want to smoke. I mean, there's probably lots of tricks like that you can do. I mean, honestly, try hypnosis. Do some NLP to get the switches and associations in your brain to go from positive to negative. So whenever you think about smoking, you have a negative reaction, and hopefully it'll help you stop doing it. Let's see. What are the specific benefits of reishi? Well, there's quite a lot, so I recommend check out HyperionHerbs.com. I have a great information on there. Also, I have probably 30 videos on this channel about reishi, and I apologize if it's loud right now. I just turned the kettle back on because I need to brew up more tea, because I need to get some more going, because I'll probably have to pee again soon. But the main benefits of reishi, just to be concise, I would say let's just focus on 2 things. First is immunomodulating qualities, help balance out the immune system, bring up parts of our immune system that are weak, bring down parts that are excessive, and then over time help re-educate the immune system to make it more efficient. Also, it's really antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, beneficial to the cardiovascular system, beneficial to the liver. That side of it. There's also the other side of it, which it can be very calming and centering for people mentally. It can really calm the heart. It can give people a more connected, meditative kind of mental state. So that's what I would say the 2 main benefits are, and that's basically why I got into it, was the latter reason primarily, because I was like, oh, I want something to help me feel more centered and focused and help with meditation or other things that I'm doing, and it was really quite beneficial. And actually, one of the first few times I took reishi, I started having out-of-body experiences spontaneously, so that was interesting. It's like, never heard of out-of-body experience, never had it, and then all of a sudden, out. I was like, all right, well, I guess that's a thing now. So that's kind of the main benefits of reishi. But again, check out HyperionHerbs.com. Check out my other videos, and definitely recommend checking out some reishi. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the transgender movement / gender politics? Well, I feel like those are kind of 2 different things. When I think of gender politics, it tends to be more like feminism, women's rights, and then the subsequent derivative movements, and also the whole men going their own way movement, which is like a response to many of these things. And then the transgender thing, I feel like, is related but kind of separate. And I've seen some things where people are like, actually, feminism and all these other people need to stop like trying to include us in their thing, because it's like a different thing. So what are my thoughts on it? Basically, I have no investment or stake or weight on any of those things. I don't pay attention to them. I don't really keep up with them. They don't interest me. They don't have any value or relevance or application to my life. I fully support people that are, I mean, I don't fully support them, but I support people's right to be into that or express themselves however they want to be. If someone feels that they're not who they should be or whatever, then that's their prerogative as a sovereign human being to do what they want to do. That's cool. I don't see any issue or problem in that with that really, but it doesn't necessarily concern me. It's not that relevant. But I'm happy to address people in different ways or call people whatever if that's what, you know, makes them makes them happy or that's what is there for their life. But generally I don't pay any attention because it's just a different world, and I don't keep up with it. I don't really keep up with much of anything within society or the world. Does not interest me. Modern society and all these things, I'm pretty out of touch on most things. Pretty out of date sometimes, because I'm focused on doing other things with my life. But yeah. So hopefully that answers that question, because it was a little bit vague and non-specific, because I feel like those two things are different things. So that's kind of what I think about them. Hopefully that was a good answer. If not, feel free to ask a more specific question if there's something that I didn't touch on. Have you heard of the Eriks brothers? They were huge in the 90s. Never heard of it. What is your morning and night routine like? What do you usually eat for breakfast? Morning, I usually wake up at like 6 a.m., do my bathroom stuff, and then I will have water. Water first thing in the morning is very important. And then I'll do some coffee, usually. And then I'll usually do work for 2 or 3 hours. Then I will eat breakfast. That's kind of the morning. Then I'll usually get into training after breakfast. Nighttime, I don't really have a routine. I usually go to bed around 9 or 10. Lately I've been going to bed at like 8:30 or 9, just because I'm tired and I don't feel like doing anything else. So I just burn some agar wood, lay in bed, and just pass out. And then get up at 6, do the same thing all over again. Hopefully that. What do you usually eat for breakfast? Usually eggs, meat, vegetables, fermented vegetables, maybe some gynostemma tea. That's usually what it is, or leftovers, or roasted vegetables and eggs, or roasted vegetables and something. It kind of just depends. Is eggnog healthy? I mean, I guess if you made it yourself, it could be, but I don't really even remember what is in eggnog. And I've never actually drank eggnog because it always sounded gross. So it's not really high up on my beverages of choice, let's say. Sleeping on a hard surface. I sleep in a hammock. It helps my busted back greatly. I don't know. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to sleep on the floor a lot, which I guess is a hard surface. But now I just sleep in my bed, and I don't know. I don't really worry about it. Fortunately, I don't have back pain or anything like that, so I don't have to make any adjustments. So I don't really know about sleeping on a hard surface. I just like my bed because it's comfortable. Because it has bamboo sheets, which are very soft. Are you into specialty coffee? I usually just drink 3 coffees. Number 1, purity coffee, or the bulletproof dark roast, or the dark roast from Longevity Warehouse. Those are the only 3 coffees that I've ever really liked or felt decent from. So I guess that would be specialty, but in terms of like specialty roasters and all these types of things, I don't touch those typically, and because they tend to make me feel like crap. And I've had all the best coffees and whatnot from the best places in my city, and I was not very impressed. But I'm also not like a coffee connoisseur or like into the flavor nuances of coffee. It's just, to me, mix it with like butter and MCT oil and herbs and take it like that. So that's kind of more what I'm into. So let's see. If I'm gonna be a connoisseur of something, I'd rather just be a connoisseur of high-end pu'er tea. Not necessarily like coffee. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I do want to try Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, like the real deal authentic stuff. And I want to try the shit coffee, the civet coffee or something. I've heard those are good. Those two I've been meaning to try, but I haven't yet tried them. And also, I've never actually had just like a straight cup of coffee in my life. It's always just been either a latte or a bulletproof. So that's kind of why I'm not really like a connoisseur. So anyways, have you heard of Purity coffee? Yes, I drink it, or I used to drink, that's all I drank for probably like the first year, and then I tried those other two brands. So I kind of go back and forth between the three. I still haven't yet decided which one is better, but I do like all three of those. And I think what Purity is doing is pretty cool and pretty unique. And I like what they have going on. So let's see, we need some more questions in here. Need like, let's see, I was trying to see if I missed some questions. Have you taken psychedelics in the last half decade? Absolutely not. Have not had any psychedelics since I was like, trying to think, when was that? I have 2008 maybe, 2007, like mushrooms. That was like the last time I had those, and that was even a pretty low dose. It wasn't very psychedelic, and that was it. I've only ever done cannabis, shrooms, and one time I thought it was supposed to be mescaline, but it actually was not mescaline, which was why I had always said I'm not going to take pills or things that I can't verify what it is, because of that exact reason. You get it from some guy who's like, oh, here's what it is, and then you take it and you're like, this is not what that is. I think it was actually 2CI or 2CB, which was like a mix of LSD and MDMA, and it was a trip. And I realized, yeah, I'm good. That was it. One time was all I needed. And that was quite a long time ago. What herbs do you consider truly tonic? One of them that comes to mind is Gynostemma. That is high up on the list. It also kind of depends on what version of the word tonic we are using. Are you using the actual TCM definition of tonics, because they have their own specific usage of the term? Or are we using the sort of pop pseudo version of the term where it's like, oh, it's a tonic, it's a good tonic herb? Or is it like that gin and tonic? Or is it like I'm having a tonic at the bar? So it kind of depends on what we're using, because if we're talking about the tonics from Chinese medicine, then we can just look up, because that's a specific category. So yeah, but definitely in terms of herbs that are pretty widespread and tolerable for a lot of people, definitely Gynostemma is up there, as is like holy basil is up there as well. Because for me, like the way people present tonic herbs is like, you can just take these all the time, all day, every day, forever, and it's always good for you. That's like, it's not actually true. It's not actually what Chinese medicine ever said. It's not actually what anyone has ever said, aside from a few popular figures who didn't really know what they were on about. To me, tonic herbs are like kind of food, really nutritious foods. And I don't tend to eat the same exact thing every single day. I might eat the same thing every day for a while, but for a long period of time, not really. It's also a bit relative. Like, you could say tonic herbs don't build up, like they don't accumulate toxicity in your body, whereas some herbs that you take, they actually will build up and slowly poison you over time or slowly undermine your functions. So you could say that is what a tonic is, in which case, you know, mostly all the medicinal mushrooms could be in that category. All of the herbs that I sell, specifically, all of the herbs I sell, aside from mucuna and nettle root, I consider to be pretty widespread tonics. Mucuna, I don't really actually consider that. I consider that more medicinal and specific applications or people that actually need it. Nettle root, same thing, but for men. So they're more specific. Whereas mostly everything else that I sell is pretty widespread and works for a lot of people. There are some people who don't really vibe with reishi, but can vibe with chaga. But generally, relatively speaking, they're all pretty well and easily tolerated by quite a lot of people. So hopefully that makes sense. Do you teach at the moment any online courses? If you go to udemy.com, type in my name, I have 2 courses on there. One is Foundations of Qigong Theory, and the other one is Foundations of Tonic Herbs. So I have those 2 on there right now, and I have more in the works, and I'll be eventually adding a lot of courses to Udemy. So definitely check those out, because they're really good, and they have good reviews. Let's see. What are some of the differences in the processing and growing of pu'er in the past versus the modern processing that's going on now? Part of it is supply and demand. Like, the demand is way more than it used to be. So, you know, back in the day, it was a lot more common for things to be harvested from just wild trees or old arbor trees. But now the demand is so high that that's just not sustainable or realistic in any way, shape, or form. So there's all this modern cultivation, modern farming, and just basically bush tea. So people are like, oh, pu'er, it's from these ancient trees. Usually it's not. Usually it's trees aren't that old, or it's, you know, from bushes or whatever. It's a pretty wide spectrum of availability, let's say. But that's kind of like one major difference is the value, or the price is way up. The market is saturated with a lot of fake nonsense, and it's just, the quality has gone down quite a lot. For the most part, some stuff you can still get that's really good, but a lot of it is like, eh. So that's also part of my motivation for the teas and stuff that I'll be selling and sourcing, is they're actually, you know, decently aged from the 80s, which isn't super old, but it's also kind of old. And some of them are much older as well. But basically bringing teas that represent the actual authentic flavor profile and specific qualities that pu'er should have, because there are actual classical flavors that it should have in order to be deemed what it is. But generally no one knows what those are, and people are consumed with flavors that are anything but those. Like, if you go on Facebook group, Gong Fu Cha, everyone's talking about smoky tea, astringent tea, bitter tea, this, and this. Literally no one's talking about any of the authentic flavors or any of the actual real qualities of what the tea should be. But that's because they're not drinking very good tea, and they don't really know up from down quite a lot of the time. So I remember I saw a post with that you tried bug shit tea. How was it? Just kind of tasted like paper. It was pretty good, but it was my friend was honestly a cheapskate and didn't use that many grams, so it was a pretty weak dilution. But some of the teas I have now, actually, have the bug shit in there, which is it sounds kind of funny to say. But basically what happens is the silkworm will only eat or munch on clean tea. If there's any chemicals in it, it won't touch it. So you kind of know, like, this tea is actually clean because this bug munched on it and then pieced out. So some of the cakes I have now have the bug shit in there, and the bug shit just on its own. Like, if you were to just sell, or if you just try to buy the bug shit on its own, it's like $12,000 for 600 grams. So it's a pretty prized ingredient, if you can believe it. But it's generally like believed to be a tonic and beneficial for the digestive system. So, and it does add kind of a nice flavor and a nice, sounds weird to say again, and a nice soothing quality. What are the main benefits of nettle? Well, nettle leaf is its own thing, which I won't talk about. Nettle root, which is what I was talking about earlier, is generally beneficial for men. My hand looks gigantic. Beneficial for men for the prostate, for basically reducing BPH and increasing levels of free testosterone. So that's generally why men would consume it. Some women take it, but that's generally what it's known for. But again, HyperionHerbs.com, and or search on my channel, and I have probably 5 videos on that herb. How tall are you? I think I'm 5'9", or like 5'9.5" or something like that. I can't remember last time I measured. What herbs that you personally feel comfortable taking regularly do you consider to have the most obvious acute psychoactive effect? I mean, psychoactive to me is not something I'm generally interested in. But like, there's a formula that I take that will generally get rid, if I have any stress or tension in my neck, this formula will get rid of it. It'll soothe my digestive system. It will usually really center me and mellow me out because how it affects the chi and the functioning of my liver. I wouldn't call that psychoactive because my mental quality is not stimulated. I have no real interest in anything psychoactive or really like fucking with my mental state to a strong degree. To me, I just generally want to feel a bit more centered and balanced, and that's about it. But I definitely, I enjoy the feeling of lion's mane, the feeling of reishi. I would say those are subtly psychoactive, but again, it's a spectrum. I feel those things, and it's kind of nice. It's calming. It's a bit centering, clears things out. Tea is like that. I mean, I have some pu'er teas that I would say are almost psychoactive, where like I would drink them with my friends and we're like giggling and laughing, and then eventually just leaning against the wall, like sedated, melts all the muscular tension, really sinks and soothes and relaxes everything in the body. So that's probably my go-to for those aspects. Hey Lorraine. Hope you had fun at the workshop. Where is the CBD you sell grown? I believe it's grown in Colorado, but it is for sure grown organically in America. I have to look for the exact state, but I'm like 98% sure it's Colorado. And then it's a full spectrum plant extract, which is why if you taste it and smell it, it's like, smells actually like what it is, tastes like actually what it is, because it's not made from just a synthetic isolate like so many of the other products. So that's why I quite like it. And a lot of my clients like it too, which is why I started selling it again, because people were like a dozen emails, people being like, oh, I can't believe you stopped selling it. This was my favorite CBD product. Like, I need you to start selling this again. It was the best. I was like, all right, I'll sell it. Here it is. Honestly, I mean, I'll sometimes I'll get a drink, or I'll get like a CBD soda out somewhere that has 25 milligrams of the isolate in there, and I don't really feel anything from it for the most part. It's pretty negligible. But sometimes I'll do it just because it's like there's some delicious CBD sodas that are out right now. So if I'm out to eat or something, I'll definitely grab one of those and do that. So yeah, definitely send some more questions. I need to text my friend and see. I need to get that formula. All right. Let's see. What do you think of astragalus? I think it's a great herb. I used to sell it, but for some reason it didn't really sell that well. I don't know why people weren't that into it. I think it's great. It's a great chi tonic, a bit of a blood tonic, a bit immunomodulatory, and I think it tastes pretty good. And it's relatively pretty cheap. So I like it. It would be nice to know what strain the CBD comes from. I don't know. I don't think there's like industrial hemp strains in the same way of like marijuana, because I know there's like a lot of high CBD marijuana strains. I've taken a bunch of them over the last couple of years, because you can get like 20% CBD, 0.2% THC, or 0.5% THC. Like it's like next to none. But these are like specifically marijuana strains that were bred, but I don't think there's necessarily industrial hemp strains in the same way. Like I don't hear people talking about, oh, I got this Purple Haze industrial hemp, or I got this OG Kush. I mean, I realize there's different varieties, but you generally don't hear that talked about in the same way. But maybe someone knows more. Maybe there's some hemp growers and breeders who can speak more expertly. Do you vote? I've actually never voted. I've never registered, and I've never actually voted. So that's that. Do you feel optimistic about the human race in the long run? I don't know. I guess I don't really care. I mean, I think in some ways it's a multi-layered question. Optimistic about the human race in terms of what? I feel optimistic about life in general, yes. About people in general, sure. But in terms of the human race in the long run, I don't really know what that means, but I do hope that things will be okay and everyone can be healthy and happy and enjoy their life. What are your favorite herbs for inflammation? Any herbs that can be grown in a small studio apartment? You can definitely grow like holy basil. All the mint family is, but in terms of growing anything outside of that, I'm not really a horticulturist, so I don't have much of an opinion. I would go to Horizon Herbs, I think is the name. I think they're actually in Oregon, but I bought some holy basil and other stuff from them many years ago. Didn't really go very well, but you might look at their website and talk to them, because you can buy live plants of a lot of different herbs, and they can probably point you in the right direction for that. Let's see. Yes, it is from hemp. Do you worry about climate change? I mean, I guess if I see things online, then it's like can be emotionally affecting, but I generally don't worry about it very much, because I think generally people are oftentimes very emotional about it and can't necessarily that coherent or clear in their arguments. I mean, to deny that we have an effect on the environment is dumb. Like, how do we not have an effect on the environment? But then it's just like, you read one article, it's like, here's the absolute proof that these glaciers are melting and these things are happening. Then you read this other article that's like, here's the absolute proof that these glaciers are the exact same and these things aren't happening. So then ultimately it just becomes like, who do you want to believe? But I mean, you can ultimately shape reality and shape the facts however you want, and manipulate people's emotions in however you want. To say what's the ultimate reality and truth of the situation, I don't know. To say that like we do pollute the environment and do stupid shit, I think that's pretty unequivocal. I mean, I don't think there's any debate about that, but for some reason people are like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. It's like, really? Do you want to just pollute all the water? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But I think ultimately, at the root of it, people in power sometimes are really stupid and psychotic, in the sense that they don't understand that there's a connection between themselves and the environment, and that they're affected by those things. They live in this very isolationist, Cartesian, absurd world, or they're just functioning in a way that is taking from lots of people and then marking that up and selling it to lots of other people. Like, take a resource from the planet for free at the detriment of a lot of things, and then sell it at a big markup. Or pay people slave wages in another country and then import it to another country and mark it up 1,000 times. Like, that's a bit dodgy, but that's what a lot of people are doing. What do you make of Shazandra? It's good. I don't think it's quite the amazing super fruit, super tonic, super adaptogen that it's hyped up to be. I've eaten the fresh berries. I've had the highest quality extracts of that herb, and it definitely can have a nice cognitive effect. It can definitely do beneficial things for people's livers. It's great in formulas. It's great, but all for things. But I wouldn't consider it, like, I wouldn't be taking a lot of it all the time, just for me. But it is a good herb, I would say, for sure. I would just put it in the category of like rhodiola and ashwagandha and things like that. Do you know anything about moxibustion? Yeah, I mean, I had some done to me earlier today, I think. Actually, no, she didn't do it today, but usually if I get acupuncture, she'll do it sometimes. It can be beneficial. It's a good folk remedy as well if you know what you're doing, but it's good to moving things in the body. What do you think of Jordan Peterson? I appreciate what he's doing and offering and bringing to the world. I think he's very coherent, very articulate, very intelligent, very excellent communicator. He's probably brought a lot of beneficial ideas and things to the world, but I'm not like a devotee or a fanboy by any stretch. Sometimes I'll watch clips, not necessarily because I agree or care about what he's saying, but I'm more so interested in how he's saying it and his degree of clarity and articulation and how much thought he's put into what he's saying. And also how he deals with other people. He's very skilled at these things. And how he'll just call people out on ridiculous shit is nice, because some of the reviews and people that try to take him down they just make themselves look stupid. like they're going up against this guy whose intellect so far exceeds their own that it's almost just like they're not even having a conversation. The person trying to attack or interview or whatever is just talking to themselves, and he's just there. Like, in even one interview, he like basically predicts this woman's philosophical belief system, and just is like, it's just really sad. It's just this really not pleasant to have to sit here and deal and like talk to you and deal with this. And I absolutely agree with what he's saying in that regard. And I feel that way many times in myself. I find quite a lot of people just lame and downers because I can pretty much predict with a high degree of probability exactly what they think, feel, believe, what their stances are, what their views are, and predictably oftentimes what they'll even say. So it's just like, there's just no point in talking. They're basically NPCs, to use that term, like non-playing characters, where it's just like, okay, you're completely usurped by this ideology, completely dominated by this belief system, completely subservient to it. So there's no one home. You just knock, and you just get conditioned, parroted responses. You get slogans. You get mantras. You just get all this predictable nonsense, but there's nothing behind it. There's no real authority. There's no real volition. There's no real investment. There's no real fortitude. It's just like grasping with air. But they compensate for that with a sense of moral superiority, hyper ideals, excessive emotionality. So like, you're either with us or you're against us. Have you seen the light, brother? And they get into all these types of fanaticism, and it's just really, it is unpleasant to deal with. It's really boring. It's sad. It's like, another one bites the dust. I mean, like, it's just kind of a ever-growing phenomena these days. People think and believe things strongly, but don't even know why, don't even know where it comes from. And the fact that it's probably 100% incorrect, which is the whole impetus of this video, was actually was a lot of times just that thing. Like, people are forming their identities. They're dedicating vast amounts of their life and their time and energy to various pursuits, never actually understanding that their basis is incorrect. Their understanding of the system is incorrect. What they were taught isn't true. Their goals aren't aligned with what they're actually trying to do. Like, the whole thing is a mismatch. So they have to instead lean on hope and faith and emotionality and fantasy and imagination and worship, or a whole bunch of other things, because it's functionally deficient and depraved and impotent, ultimately. Which sounds like, oh, he's negative. He's like dissing people. I'm not. Like, it's just, it's how I feel. And it becomes very clear at a certain stage if you actually go deep into something. So for those reasons, I do appreciate JP, but I'm not really like a devotee. I just can really understand his plight and understand his pain, and also appreciate what he's trying to do, but also in some ways how futile it is. Because the thing is like, often it's rare that you're actually dealing with like a logical, rational, aware person. You're mostly oftentimes dealing with emotionality or like self-worth or things of this nature. This is usually what it's about for people, which again was what I was trying to say earlier with this whole base desires thing. Is people think it's about this, they're trying to make it about this, but it's actually really about this. And the further they go away from that, the less empowered they get, the less healthy they become, the less functional they become. Which, why would I say that? Why would I think those things? On a personal level, because like I'm saying from Peterson, it's just disappointing and sad and unpleasant to deal with. On the flip side, it is also a bummer to see people get screwed over, to see people get scammed, to see people waste their time, waste their energy, waste their life, hurt themselves, hurt other people. Like, it's just a bummer to see, especially when you're like, it doesn't have to be that way, guys. You could do something else. There is another option. Like, no one's making you do these things. You're just beating yourself up. but then villain. You then become the bad guy, the scapegoat, because you're either reminding that person of their insecurity or their I don't know, stuff they don't want to be aware of. So of course you're the villain, which, I mean, I made videos about that back when I was more like upset and negative about it. One was why I don't trust most people or take them seriously. The other one was like why I felt angry and depressed a lot of my life or something like that. And those videos actually did really well, and they were somewhat cathartic for me. And yeah, at the time I was rather upset for those reasons, because it just gets to be a bummer after a while. Like, I don't know. It's like, oh, let's have tea. Why do we want to have tea? Because let's say this tea's fucking dope, right? So if I want to drink this tea because it's dope, I want to drink it because of the tea. But then, like, people will make it about, oh, I'm drinking this tea because it's about tea and Zen. So this is spiritual now, and I'm being more conscious, and I'm like getting more enlightenment points because I'm like doing Zen and tea, and like Zen and tea is one taste, and it's like Cha Dao, it's like Taoism. So it's like Bodhidharma, but it's like Lao Tzu, and then it's like, it just becomes this whole level of insanity where it's like, actually, dude, it's just, this is pretty much it. Like, all this other shit is just your own nonsense, your own complexity, your own way of missing the point, your own way of skirting any degree of responsibility, your own degree of actually being personally accountable or present or responsible for your actions, for your experience in any way, shape, or form. Because you have all these levels of extraneous nonsense to hide behind. You have all this safety net to keep your actual true self and your feelings and your actual experience in a cage, so that if anything goes awry or goes haywire, you have 1,000,001 excuses and reasons and explanations for why that is, instead of actually just, the tea was good or it wasn't, and leave it at that. Or the tea was good, but it actually went way over my head because I don't have the actual skill set to appreciate it, which happens, which is totally possible. So what happens is, let's say you get into the tea game and you're like, man, I love this because of what it is. And then you meet a bunch of people who think, who say that that's what they're doing, but what they're actually doing is all the other nonsense, and they're not actually connected with this at all. So then you hang out with them and you're like, well, we're having two very different experiences. And for me, like, I showed up here under the assumption that it was about this thing, because we both agreed that we liked this thing, but you're off in La La Land about something else. So one of us is dishonest here. One of us is being untruthful. One of us is living in a schizoid, divorced way. One of us is not even in the fucking room. So then you, let's say, have that experience 1,000 times. Eventually, it can be a bit like draining and upsetting. And that might be in many other contexts aside from tea. It could be in dating, where you're like, oh, I think we're both here because we're doing this thing, but actually you're off in La La Land. Your psychic energy is usurped by this thing. You're not even in the room. Like, who knows where you are. And these are all perceptible things. Like, for example, just to use the tea thing, let's say this tea is really relaxing. If I drink it by myself, it's like sedating, calming, balancing, relaxes muscle tension, diaphragm relaxes, breath drops down, everything feels good, right? The thing is tea can be a great barometer. Some of my friends, I could drink this with and I'll have that experience and then some. It'll be good, but it'll be even better because now I'm with this person and we're sharing this experience and we're feeding off each other and making both of our experiences even more enjoyable. And then I'll have other friends, other people that I drink it with, can't even really taste the tea. And then instead of feeling relaxed, it's like buzzy and irritating same exact tea, same water, same everything's brewed in the same way, but the results and the outcome is distinctly different. One is because the person's actually here, somehow in some metaphysical way, this person's actually shown up and we're actually sharing an experience and inhabiting the same space together. The other one is this guy or this person is on their phone, they're stressed out, they're thinking about this, they're thinking about that, they're all over the fucking place, but their persona is, I'm spiritual, I'm relaxed, I'm present, I'm mindful. It's like, well, your persona, your facade, your act is, but your actual, what's actually here is not that, and you're actually way off. And it's completely apparent and tangible within the proof's in the pudding, let's say. So if you have that experience enough times, eventually it's easy to where you arrive in a position where you're having an interview like the one I'm talking about with Peterson, where it's like, this is just unpleasant. It's just really unpleasant to deal with and be around. And he's like genuinely sad because it doesn't have to be that way. But for some reason, people insist that it does. And then if you're like, hey, it doesn't, they're like, you're a jerk. You're a mean person. You're a Nazi. Like whatever the fuck people get into. So anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. So hopefully, yeah. Peterson's inability to see the complete corruption of the West or his denial of it is extremely problematic. I would say the assumption that the West is completely corrupt is a bit big, but I will say there is obviously, undeniably, a lot of corruption, which maybe he isn't able to accept, and he does have this idealized version. But generally, his idealized version is supported by verifiable facts. So I don't know, but also saying complete corruption of the West, that's a bit much. Let's see. Do you enjoy music? If so, what do you listen to? I generally don't listen to music really at all anymore in the past months. Yeah, I haven't listened to music in quite a while. But usually it would be classical music or Chinese classical music or Indian classical music or like some electronic stuff. Generally none of it has words or is particularly that emotionally centric. But, you know, if I go out to eat, they're always playing some fucking music because, you know, it's people just really like to have their emotional centers stimulated all the time. And it's kind of gross and masturbatory, like to me after a while, where it's like, dude, really? You just gotta be in this state? But also understand like people are at work and they don't particularly maybe want to even be there, so they need some stimulation, some distraction to keep them going. But it is just annoying sometimes being a customer in a restaurant or a place where the music's just too loud and it's just too emotional. It's like, dude, I didn't come in here to have a cry. I just came in here to get a sandwich. Like, let's just chill a little bit. What do you think of aliens? I generally don't think about aliens that much, but they're probably real. I don't know. You're right, completely corrupt was hyperbolic, but the West is very corrupt. I hate to break it to you, but the East is pretty damn corrupt as well. I don't know if you've studied China very much, or literally the modern world is just corrupt. I think that might be a more accurate term. I don't think it's East or West anymore. I think it's just human beings in general, especially when in power, have always been corrupt, and corruption has always existed. Like, I think that is just undeniable, because when you put people in power, they get corrupt, generally, unless they've really addressed their base desires and done a lot of work, or they happen to be a rare, very moral, upright person. I can't stand how they have TVs everywhere now. Yeah, me either, man. I will leave a restaurant. I've left restaurants definitely when they have TVs everywhere. It's like, dude, if I wanted to watch TV, I would have stayed at home. So I generally avoid restaurants that have TVs, or I'll just sit away from it because it's so stupid. It doesn't make any sense to me. But people like to shovel the food in and watch the TV, I guess. I don't know. It's like pretty annoying. That's why fine dining restaurants tend to be a bit better, because at least they understand the value of ambiance. And like, let's think about how the music interacts with the environment, interacts with the food. Like, let's put a little bit of thought into that. How about that, guys? It's like, if you actually are feeling more chill and comfortable and relaxed, you're going to probably eat more. You're going to probably digest better, and you're probably going to want to come back to that place more. But if you go there, you're all overstimulated and unconsciously irritated. It's going to throw off your digestion. You're not going to feel as good, and you're probably not going to come back. So that's just dumb. Like, just think about it. You ignored 2 questions of mine or didn't see them. I guess I didn't see them, so please repeat them. Will you ever release a mushroom blend of some sort, like a mix of reishi, cordyceps, lion mane, all in one? I thought about it, but also, I guess at a certain point it gets to be confusing, because it's like you sell all these mushrooms, but then you sell all these mushrooms in a blend. So which one should I buy? It's like, well, you can buy all the mushrooms because they're all good, or you can buy the blend because they're all good. I don't know. So that's why it's always, as a business perspective, been a little bit dodgy. And because sometimes people like to have the option to choose that. And then if you're doing a blend, then you get more things, but you get a more diluted amount of each thing. But I mean, I definitely could do it. It's very doable, but I just have not for those business reasons. You wake up with an alarm, if I remember right. Why do you choose to do this? Because I want to wake up at a specific time. And usually if I don't set the alarm, I'll wake up around that time anyways, but I just want to be sure that I wake up around that time because I have stuff that I want to do and need to do, so I wake up. I like to wake up at a specific time. It's pretty straightforward, I guess. I need help with cognition and study. What helps? I would say high quality tea is good. Lion's mane, pretty good. L-theanine can be good. Binaural beats or those types of things could be helpful as well. So those would be good things. Let's see. How to move from compulsive stimulation of base desires to higher level of creative expression. Probably willpower, desire, dedication, focus, commitment. That's probably the best way. Also, if you feel more comfortable and empowered, so your body's more comfortable, then that's probably what I would say. But yeah, just developing those qualities of mind, and it's the only thing that's going to get it done usually. Supporting the positive and developing more positive qualities like dedication, focus, willpower, commitment, those things. Strength, power. Those are necessary and beneficial. Tips for clearing dampness and inflammation in the nostrils. You can do like essential oil steams, to where you put, say, like eucalyptus, lavender in really hot water so it's steaming, and then put your face over it with a towel and cover it, breathe it in. Or something like neti pot. Or perhaps dietary things like food allergies and stuff that create stagnation and damp. For me, I have many years of sinus pressure and compression in my skull that I'm only starting to unwind, which is funny because I go back and listen to some of my old videos and my voice is real nasally, and I'm like, dude, my head was fucking compressed. Partially I had braces multiple times. I've had multiple traumas to my head, which I don't know if you can notice, but my nose is like really crooked, which I always notice it more when I'm on here, but my nose is really crooked. Because definitely when I was a kid, I took a lot of beatings to the head. So for me, I'm unwinding a lot of pressure in my skull, which has created a lot of sinus stuff. And also there's other organs, your spleen and your heart, which can influence that as well. So yeah. Do you think casual sex is harmful? Harmful in what sense? Physically, mentally, emotionally? I would say if it's approached in the right way and people are mature about it, it can be all right. Like if you're just purely like, hey man, I just really need to get laid. Do you want to get laid? Yeah, okay. But the thing is I don't know that sex is always that clean. Meaning there's probably always some emotional component, some chemical component that is people want to deny or ignore. But I would say that you can't necessarily deny or ignore it unless you want to be a fucking sociopath. But I definitely had phases in my life where I was involved in casual sex, and I can say that looking back, if I could not do those experiences, I'd be more than happy to not have them. Meaning nothing that great or beneficial or lasting came out of it. All the great sexual experiences I've had were all in a relationship where I had time to build like a rapport and comfort and trust and a sense of connection with someone. But that's just me. But I don't know. I don't think people should necessarily avoid it because it's morally bad or like, oh, sex is only reserved for marriage or some angle like that. To me, it's a bit more common sense. It's like, just to me, it takes time to kind of get to know someone and develop comfort and rapport for it to be that enjoyable. Because honestly, if it's like awkward sex and that uncomfortable weird stuff, then I'd probably rather just rub one out and go about my day than investing all the time and energy for like all of that process. But I tend to be a bit introverted and self-contained in many ways that other people aren't, and many people are very comfortable and cavalier about sex and casual sex and can do it without any hiccups or hang-ups. So that's it. That's their whole thing, and that's what they're into. So if it works for them, that's great. But I think the jury is still out in many ways, because if you start talking about casual sex, you kind of have to start talking about online dating, and then you have to start talking about the decline and downfall of modern relationships and dating, which a lot of people are, and saying that they're just getting more superficial and transactional, and that people aren't able to actually connect deeply and authentically anymore, and people are less interested in pair bonding or getting into long-term relationships. So just kind of depends. So hopefully that answers that question. Let's see. What do you think of ginseng roots you find at local Asian market? Not very good quality, and probably wouldn't do it. I mean, I've taken all that stuff and bought it, but if you just want to add it to like a soup or a stew or a broth, sure. But like if you're buying Korean red ginseng, probably wouldn't do it, because who knows if it's clean, and it's probably not very old, and it's definitely not a tonic herb. It's going to probably just be a stimulant. But if you buy it, cook it in with like a soup or like a broth and add it in like lots of other herbs that are supportive, then it could be okay, I guess. But I'd rather just, if you're going to spend like 20, 30 bucks on Asian ginseng roots at a market, just spend 20 or 30 bucks and get some gynostemma. Like, you're going to get way more out of it. It's going to be way better for you, way more value for your money, in my opinion. Would any advice on boron as a supplement for the body and its so-called benefits for the pineal gland? I think this is referencing like taking that to decalcify the pineal gland, and to me that whole thing is like bunk. Like, I wouldn't eat borax to decalcify my pineal gland, and I don't think that's even really a thing, personally. I think that's kind of into the conspiracy, fear-based world. I know people take boron as a mineral supplement to have effects on their testosterone levels, but I've never done it, so I can't speak with any personal experience. But I will say the whole thing about decalcifying the pineal gland and taking things to decalcify it is kind of not real, and is probably relegated to like Alex Jones type worldviews and whatnot. I think someone asked me earlier what I think about simulation theory. And it's funny someone asked, because I heard someone talking about it earlier today in passing. In an office that I was at, I heard someone talking about it. And basically what my first thought is this is just another techno way for people to skirt any degree of personal responsibility, personal accountability, or investment in their own life. It's just a techno way of basically shrugging off responsibility for your life. Oh, it's a simulation. We're just in a simulation, so it's fine. It's like, to me, the fact that that is like a topic of debate just is evidence of how low the bar is now in terms of what is considered like intellectual discourse or interesting theory. Like, to me, it's just really pointless and irrelevant as a thing. There's way more important questions to be asking. There's way more important, relevant discussions to be having than, are we living in a simulation? Are we AI? Are we this? It's that. It's like, dude, really? Like, it's a bit sad, honestly, the fact that people are really that deep into the conditioning. So you feel that the pineal gland is already open. I think all of the information about the pineal gland is generally incorrect, and people's assumption and belief about it is incorrect. And that people that think that the reason why they're not spiritual is due to their pineal gland being open or closed or calcified or not is incorrect, and is a waste of time and energy as an exploration and as a belief system. I think I've talked about that in many things in the past, but to me personally, it is not a valid thing, and that's not how it functions, and it's basically misappropriating and a lot of misunderstanding for ancient understanding, let's say. So that's why I'm not really that into it, because to me, it's just in the realm of like, if people are like into like that type of thing, they're probably also into like smoking weed and like plant medicines and all this other stuff, which does not interest me. It doesn't hold really value or weight, and it ultimately doesn't make people more spiritual or more open. It makes them more open in the sense that it erodes their natural psychic protections. It erodes their immune system. It erodes their boundaries and sense of self, and overheats and overstimulates their nervous system and their chemistry, so that they have novel and varied experiences, which they then interpret through their own bias and lens of spirituality, and then assume, ergo, it must be that I'm more spiritual now or more in tune. When in reality, you might just be in touch with who knows what, demonic entities, things that are just leeching and draining your energy over the long term. And again, it just relates to the simulation theory. It's kind of just another way of skirting personal responsibility and investment and accountability for our own internal ecosystem. It's just a mechanistic way of being like, oh, the reason why I am the way I am is because of this chemical or this, not that chemical. Which is like, if we believe that, then we might as well just take Prozac, because Prozac tells us we're depressed because we're deficient in a certain neurotransmitter. So if you believe that about one thing, then believe it about the other, and it's a far more easier stretch. But usually people that are like, got to decalcify my pineal gland, are also saying like, oh, pharmaceutical drugs are bad and like the system's bad and it's corrupt and vaccines are bad and the chemtrails are bad and they're trying to dilute us and keep us down. And the reason why our pineal glands are decalcified is because they put fluoride in the tap water and chlorine in the tap water and they're trying to dumb us down. So it's like, but wait, you're using the same exact philosophical belief system and approach that they are. So how are you any different? You're not. You're just operating under the same assumptions, but confusing and diluting yourself, and that you're doing something different. So, yeah, that's what I think about it. Do you think cosmetic surgery can ever be appropriate? Absolutely. If someone really needs it, really wants it, then it sounds like it can be very appropriate. It's not. I mean, earlier I wasn't knocking or putting anyone down. I was just basically pointing out how people would be like, "Oh, I'm not going to eat coconut oil," or like, "I'm a vegan because it's clean and pure," but they're like dosing themselves with like a lot of things, and it's just like it's a huge contradiction of things. That's all I was pointing out. I wasn't saying any of it was inherently bad or incorrect. Let's see, any other questions? There's a practice of medicine in TCM, similar to TCM, called Kampo in Japan. Are you familiar with it? This is going to be a really unpopular opinion with Japanese people, but it's just basically Chinese medicine. Like, whatever's in Japan just came from China. Like, for example, you'll hear about a lot of things, like Reiki, for example, is a good example of this. So like, oh, he learned it on a mountaintop from like an angel or like a god or something. No, he learned it from a Chinese person. But he couldn't say he learned it from a Chinese person because of cultural and racial prejudices. Same thing, I think, with like the founding of Aikido. It's like, oh, he learned it from like a light being or an angel, or he came to him in a vision. It's like, no, he learned it from a Chinese person. So Kampo is just Chinese medicine, but it incubated and changed in Japan based on their own, like Confucianism is underpinning Japanese culture as it is Korean culture, which came from China. But obviously it's changed. They have their own versions, they have their own things, and no Japanese person would probably admit the things that I just said because it's culturally offensive and inappropriate. So, yeah, but that's as familiar with it as I am. So let's see. So basically it's just an illusionary program of the ego. In your opinion, do you feel that there is any way to find true self? Yes and yes. Is there any way to find it? Yes. Basically, there is, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's accessible. It doesn't mean it's accessible for a lot of people. And it doesn't mean that even if people try, it doesn't mean that they'll succeed, because most people won't. Most people will fail. Most people will fail miserably. Most people will never even come close to approximating the correct methodology. That sounds a bit unfair, but this is basically what these traditions and cultures have always said and thought and believed. And these types of informations and paths and pursuits have never been intended for the masses or for widespread lots of people. It's no light matter, it's no childish matter, it's no casual matter in any regard. So it is possible, but doesn't mean it's easy, it doesn't mean it's accessible, it doesn't mean that we'll be able to just do it. And the vast majority of the time, we're going to do it really wrong. And usually go even further in the wrong direction, which is what often happens. Let's see. What's a good way to get over very scary nightmares once one wakes up and wants to have a peaceful day? That's a good question. I don't know. Watch a funny movie or something? I don't know. Generally change our countenance so we're able to laugh more, laugh at ourselves more, laugh at life more, and not be necessarily so fixated or hung up on what like our feelings or emotional state is. I know that sounds weird and like a strange response, but it's kind of what comes to mind. Just do a bunch of Tai Chi. How about that? Exercise. eat good food, take care of your body, and definitely keep the mood up, keep the heart up through doing things that you enjoy and, you know, laughing. Let's see. What's your take on Mooji Baba's pointing in satsangs? No idea what that is. Mooji is someone that's never appealed or interested me, and never really invested a lot of time or energy in that person. So I can't really comment in a very cohesive manner. Let's see. What would you recommend for someone who works night shifts and never sees the light of day? I mean, I guess you could like hit up some tanning beds. You could get like a red light therapy. You could get one of those happy lights, which is just exposing you to some bright light. But otherwise, I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get going soon, I think, because it's already been like many hours on the live stream. And I gotta get some dinner and such before it gets too late. Because I was already pretty tired today, actually. Today was a rest day for me. So I got some acupuncture and I got a haircut. So my hair looks a bit weird. It's the first day of the haircut. Usually takes a little bit to like click in and make sense. But anyways, if there's no more questions, it's been like 3 hours, holy shit. Anyways, thanks everyone for tuning in and for asking questions. Again, if you didn't catch before, I have 2 courses on udemy.com. If you type in my name on Udemy, then you'll see I have my Tonic herb course and I have my Foundations of Qigong Theory course. Definitely check out those courses if you haven't already. They're really good. I'm going to be putting more courses on there. Obviously, if you haven't checked out Hyperion Herbs, you probably should. A lot of good herbs and products on there. And definitely worked very hard to bring some good stuff, put some good stuff on there. So anyways, hopefully this has been fun. Hopefully I've answered your question. But anyways, thanks again for tuning in. Check out the courses, check out Hyperion Herbs. Have you ever used blue blockers? Yeah, I have some around here somewhere. But I use pretty much usually if I'm at home and I'm on my computer or phone, or any electronic screen, I have the blue blockers on. It's helped out quite a lot at cutting down eye strain from devices, and especially at night, I'll use them, and I highly recommend the blue blockers. If you can get some, because they're pretty, you can just get cheap ones on Amazon for like 10 bucks. Don't need to buy the super expensive ones because they're basically the same. But anyways, hope you have a good night wherever you are in the world,